Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're diving into an absolutely insane concept. What if Issei from high school DxD was Dante's grandson from Devil May Cry? This is broken. You're combining the boosted gear's infinite power doubling with Sparta bloodline abilities that already let Dante casually destroy dimensions. Add devil transformation magic on top, the power scaling goes completely off the charts. Plus, mixing Issei's heroic pervert energy with that legendary Sparta cockiness creates epic character development potential. In this story, Issei discovers his heritage as pure demons threaten to collapse reality itself, forcing the ultimate supernatural alliance. He goes from perverted student to cosmic guardian of universal stability. Smash that like, subscribe, hit the bell, let's dive in. The cold autumn air bit at my face as I walked through the park, my heart pounding with nervous excitement. Finally, a girl had asked me out on a date. Yuma Amano, with her long black hair and mysterious smile, had somehow seen something worth dating in Issei Hyodo, the school's most notorious pervert. This has to be a dream, I thought, adjusting my school uniform for the 100th time. There's no way someone like her would actually, Issei-kun. I turned to see Yuma approaching, her purple dress flowing elegantly in the evening breeze. Even in the dim light of the park's street lamps, she looked absolutely stunning. My perverted mind immediately began cataloging her attributes, but something felt different tonight. There was an odd tension in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. "You came," she said, her voice carrying a strange undertone I couldn't quite place. "Of course I came. I mean, when a beautiful girl like you asks me out, I'm not going to say no." I grinned, trying to push down the weird feeling gnawing at my gut. We spent the next few hours walking around town, talking about school and trivial things. Yuma seemed genuinely interested in our conversations, asking questions about my family, my dreams, my hobbies. It felt too good to be true, because it was. As the evening drew to a close, we found ourselves back in the park where we'd started. The fountain in the center cast dancing shadows in the moonlight, and for a moment everything felt perfect. "Issei-kun," Yuma said softly, moving closer to me, "I had a wonderful time tonight." "Me too," I replied, my heart racing. "Maybe we could do this again sometime." Her smile changed then, becoming something cold and predatory. "I'm afraid not." The temperature around us seemed to drop 10 degrees. The streetlights flickered and dimmed, and suddenly the shadows felt alive, writhing with malevolent intent. "You see, Issei-kun," she continued, her voice now dripping with malice, "you've served your purpose. But now, you've become a threat that must be eliminated." Black wings erupted from her back, massive and gleaming with dark feathers. Her cute dress dissolved into revealing black leather, and her gentle expression transformed into something truly terrifying. In her hand materialized a spear of pure light crackling with lethal energy. "A fallen angel," I whispered, my legs refusing to move despite every instinct screaming at me to run. "Very good. Though it won't matter in a few seconds." Rainier, her true name somehow echoed in my mind, raised the light spear above her head. "Goodbye, Issei Hyodo, thank you for being born. And for dying." The spear pierced through my chest with a sickening wet sound. Pain beyond anything I'd ever imagined exploded through my body, and I felt my life beginning to ebb away. As I collapsed to the ground, watching my blood pool on the concrete, a strange thought crossed my mind. Is this really how I die, without ever touching a pair of oppi? But then something else stirred within me. As darkness crept in at the edges of my vision, I heard a voice deep, confident, and tinged with dark amusement. "Not today, kid. You've got too much of my blood in you to go down that easy." The world went black. The next thing I knew, I was lying in an unfamiliar bed, soft sheets pulled up to my chin. Sunlight streamed through curtains I didn't recognize, and the scent of flowers filled the air. My chest, where the spear had pierced me, felt fine. Better than fine, actually. "You're awake." I turned my head to see a girl with long crimson hair sitting in a chair beside the bed. She was absolutely gorgeous, the kind of beauty that made my usual perverted thoughts seem almost sacred in comparison. Her blue-green eyes watched me with a mixture of concern and something else. "Wariness, where am I?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What happened to you died," she said simply. "I brought you back." The memories flooded back then, Yuma. The date, the spear of light, the voice in the darkness. You're Ria's Gremory," I said, suddenly recognizing her from school. "The most popular girl in Kyo Academy, president of the Occult Research Club." "But how did you—" "I'm a devil, Issei," she interrupted. "And now so are you." She explained everything then. How she'd been watching me, how she'd sensed the sacred gear sleeping within me, how she'd used her devil pieces to resurrect me as her servant. It should have been overwhelming, but somehow it all made perfect sense. Too much sense, I realized. Why am I taking this so calmly? The process should have been straightforward, Riaz continued, but something went wrong during your resurrection. Or perhaps something went right in an unexpected way. What do you mean? Instead of answering, she handed me a mirror. The face that stared back at me was still mine, but different. My brown hair now had distinct streaks of white running through it, and my eyes occasionally flashed from brown to brilliant blue like sapphires catching light. This isn't normal for a devil transformation, Riaz said carefully. Tell me, Issei, what do you know about your family history? Not much, I admitted. My dad doesn't talk about his side of the family, he always said they were complicated. Before Riaz could respond, the door burst open and a blonde girl rushed in. I recognized her immediately, Akeno Haimjima, the school's other legendary beauty and Riaz's best friend. Riaz. Theirs, she stopped mid-sentence when she saw me, her purple eyes widening. He's awake, but the energy readings from his room have been completely chaotic. How is he even conscious? Energy readings? I asked. Akeno glanced at Riaz, who nodded. Every devil gives off a specific type of demonic energy. It's like a fingerprint, but yours, she trailed off, looking troubled. Mine what? It's not just demonic, Riaz said slowly. There's something else mixed in, something that shouldn't be possible. As if responding to their words, I felt a strange sensation building in my chest. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, like a second heartbeat, steady and strong. The room suddenly felt too small, too confining. I need some air, I said, standing up. To my surprise, I felt incredible, not just healthy but powerful. Every muscle in my body hummed with energy I'd never possessed before. Issei, wait, Riaz started, but I was already moving toward the window. What happened next defied explanation. Without thinking, I simply stepped forward and suddenly I was outside, having somehow moved through the closed window without breaking it. I landed gracefully in the garden 3 stories below, my legs absorbing the impact like it was nothing. What the hell? Impressive, said a voice behind me. I spun around to see a small blonde girl in a gothic Lolita dress watching me with ancient-looking golden eyes. Despite her youthful appearance, something about her radiated immense power and authority. Who are Koneko Taoju, she said simply. You're fast, too fast for a newly turned devil. Before I could ask what she meant, Riaz and Akeno came rushing out of the house, both looking panicked. Issei, you can't just… Riaz stopped when she saw where I was standing. How did you get down here so quickly? I'm not sure, I admitted. I just wanted to get outside and then I was. The 3 girls exchanged meaningful glances. We need to contact the Gremory family immediately, Akeno said in a low voice. This level of ability development isn't normal. What's not normal? I demanded, getting frustrated with all the cryptic comments. That's when I heard it again, the voice from my dying moments, clearer now. Kid, you're about to find out you're a lot more than just some devil's servant. The voice seemed to be coming from inside my head, but it definitely wasn't my own thoughts. It was older, more experienced, with an edge of dark humor that reminded me of someone who'd seen too much but kept fighting anyway. Did you guys hear that? I asked, looking around. Hear what? Riaz replied, though her expression had grown even more concerned. Before I could explain, a new sensation hit me, danger approaching fast. Every instinct I'd never known I possessed suddenly screamed warnings, and I found myself moving without conscious thought. Get down, I shouted, tackling all 3 girls to the ground just as something massive crashed into the spot where we'd been standing. The creature that rose from the crater was like something out of a nightmare. Easily 8 feet tall, with gray skin, massive claws, and eyes that burned with malevolent red fire. It looked like a demon, but not the sophisticated kind that Riaz represented. This was something primal, savage, and hungry. Impossible, Riaz breathed, scrambling to her feet. How did it get past the school's barriers? The demon's gaze fixed on me, and when it spoke, its voice was like grinding stone. Sparta blood, after so long, finally, Sparta. The name hit me like a physical blow, bringing with it a flood of fragmented images. A white-haired man in a red coat, massive swords, battles against impossible odds. What did you call me? I demanded, stepping forward despite the obvious danger. The demon's laugh was like breaking glass. You don't even know, do you? The last of the legendary bloodline, walking around ignorant of his heritage. How disappointing. It lunged forward with inhuman speed, claws extended to tear me apart. In that moment, time seemed to slow. I could see every detail of its attack, could predict exactly where each claw would strike. More importantly, I could see exactly how to counter it. My body moved on pure instinct. I sidestepped the creature's charge, grabbed its extended arm, and used its own momentum to flip it over my shoulder and slam it into the ground with bone-crushing force. The impact created another crater, and the demon lay still for a moment, stunned. How? Akeno whispered. That was definitely not a devil technique, Koneko added, her usually stoic expression showing genuine surprise. The demon struggled to its feet, now looking at me with something approaching respect. Yes, the blood runs true, but untrained, unfocused. You are a weapon without purpose, boy. My purpose, I said, and somehow I knew the words were true even as I spoke them, is to protect the people I care about. Something shifted inside me then. The strange energy I'd been feeling suddenly focused, condensed, and transformed into something solid. In my right hand materialized a sword, not quite the same as in the fragmented images I'd seen, but similar. It was translucent, like it was made of crystallized spirit, with a blade that seemed to hum with contained power. The demon's eyes widened. Impossible. You cannot manifest the... I moved without thinking, crossing the distance between us in a single step. The spectral blade sliced clean through the creature's torso, and it dissolved into black mist with a shriek that made my ears ring. As the sword faded from my hand, I turned to face the three girls, who were staring at me like I'd just grown a second head. Issei, Ria said slowly, "What's your father's full name?" Goro Hyodo, I replied automatically. Why, his original name before he came to Japan. I frowned, searching my memory. I think it was Tony. Tony something Italian, he never talked about it much. Ria's went very pale. Tony, Anthony, Antonio, she looked at the others. We need to make some calls immediately. Will someone please tell me what's going on? I demanded. The voice in my head chuckled. Welcome to the family business, kid. Hope you're ready for one hell of a ride. As if in response to the voice, I felt something settling into place inside me, like puzzle pieces finally finding their proper arrangement. The power that had been chaotic and unfocused suddenly felt right, natural, like I'd been carrying around a part of myself I'd never known existed. Looking at my hands, I saw they were completely steady despite everything that had just happened. No fear, no panic, just a calm readiness for whatever came next. This is what I was meant to be, I realized. Not just a devil, not just a sacred gear wielder, but something more. Something that could stand between the darkness and the people I wanted to protect. Riaz, I said, my voice carrying a new confidence I'd never possessed before, I think we need to have a much longer conversation about what exactly I am. She nodded, still looking shaken. Yes, I believe we do, but first we need to figure out how that creature got past our defenses, and whether there are more of them coming. As if in answer to her words, a low howl echoed across the night sky, followed by another and another. Whatever had just attacked us, it wasn't alone. I felt the spectral sword materialize in my hand again, this time staying solid and real. The voice in my head spoke one more time, clearer than ever. Time to earn that bloodline, son. Your real education starts now. Looking up at the moon, which suddenly seemed brighter and more ominous than before, I couldn't help but grin. My life as a normal perverted high school student was definitely over. But maybe, just maybe, what came next would be even better. The morning after my encounter with the demon felt surreal. I sat in the occult research club room, still processing everything that had happened. The white streaks in my hair caught the sunlight streaming through the windows, and every so often, I caught my reflection showing those strange blue eyes that definitely weren't mine. Riaz paced back and forth in front of her desk, her usually composed demeanor cracked with worry and curiosity. Akeno sat gracefully in her chair, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Koneko remained stoically silent in the corner, though her golden eyes never left me. Even Kiba had joined us this morning, his usual friendly smile replaced with serious concern. Issei, Riaz finally said, stopping her pacing to face me directly. We need to talk about what happened last night. That creature, it knew you, more specifically, it knew your bloodline. Sparta, I said quietly, the name feeling both foreign and familiar on my tongue. It called me Sparta Blood. The legendary Dark Knight Sparta, Kiba said, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. He's a figure of legend among all supernatural beings. A demon who rebelled against his own kind to protect humanity 2,000 years ago. Akeno leaned forward, her purple eyes intense. If you're truly connected to that bloodline, it would explain the unusual energy readings we've been detecting from you. But Issei, Sparta had only two known sons, Dante and Virgil. Both were supposed to be the last of their line. Were, I emphasized, past tense. What if one of them had a family? The voice in my head chuckled. Smart kid. Keep thinking along those lines. I decided to voice what I'd been wondering about all night. My dad. He never talks about his family. He came to Japan from somewhere in Europe when he was young, changed his name, started over completely. What if there was a reason he was running? Ria's eyes widened. You think your father is? I think my father might be Dante's son, I said, the words feeling strangely right. Which would make me his grandson. The room fell silent. Even Koneko looked stunned. If that's true, Ria said slowly, then you're not just my devil's servant anymore. You're something unprecedented, a devil with the blood of the legendary Dark Knight flowing through your veins. Before anyone could respond, there was a sharp knock at the club room door. We all tensed, remembering the demon attack from the night before. But instead of another monster, a woman's voice called out, "Delivery for Issei Hyodo, special pakage." Ria's and I exchanged glances. "I didn't order anything," I said. "Let me get it," Kiba offered, moving toward the door with his hand ready to summon his sword. He opened the door cautiously, revealing a delivery woman in a standard uniform holding a large, ornate wooden box. She seemed completely ordinary, middle-aged, tired-looking, the kind of person you'd see anywhere. But something about her eyes seemed knowing. "Issei Hyodo?" she asked, looking directly at me. "That's me," she smiled, a sad, understanding smile. "This is from your grandfather. He wanted you to have it when the time came." She handed me the box, then paused. "He also wanted me to tell you. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, kid. Time to earn your stripes." Before I could ask any questions, she was gone, not walked away gone, like she'd never been there at all. "Okay, that wasn't ominous at all," I muttered, staring at the box in my hands. It was heavier than it looked, made of dark wood with intricate silver inlay work depicting scenes of battles between demons and a lone warrior. The craftsmanship was incredible and something about it felt alive, powerful. "Should I open it?" I asked. "Do you feel any danger from it?" Riaz asked. I concentrated, trying to sense any malevolent energy. Instead, what I felt was warmth, familiarity, like the box contained something that had been waiting for me my entire life. "No," I said. "It feels safe, like it belongs to me." I opened the latch and the box creaked open to reveal its contents. Inside, wrapped in what looked like ancient red leather, was a coat. The coat, I recognized it from the fragmented images I'd been seeing in my dreams. Deep red leather with intricate silver buckles and detailing, clearly designed for both style and combat. Beneath the coat was an envelope addressed simply to the next generation in bold, confident handwriting. "Is that," Akeno whispered, "Dante's coat," I confirmed, lifting it from the box. The moment my fingers touched the leather, I felt a jolt of energy run through me. Images flashed through my mind, battles against impossible odds, a cocky grin in the face of certain death, and an unshakable determination to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The coat fit perfectly, like it had been made for me. As I shrugged it on, I felt something settle into place inside me, not just the physical weight of the garment, but something deeper. A sense of purpose, of legacy, of responsibility. "Read the letter," Riaz urged. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers and began to read aloud. "Hey there, grandson, if you're reading this, then the supernatural world has finally caught up with you, and those fancy new devil powers aren't quite cutting it on their own. Don't worry, it happens to the best of us. Your dad never told you about the family business because he wanted you to have a normal life. Can't say I blame him, this gig isn't exactly what you'd call safe. But genetics have a way of catching up with you, and Sparta blood doesn't stay quiet forever. By now you've probably figured out that you're my grandson. Your father was my son, though he chose a different path than the old man. Smart kid, really. Settled down, found love, tried to give his family the peaceful life I never could. But peace isn't always an option when you're part of this bloodline. The coat you're wearing has been passed down through our family for generations. It's more than just fashion, it's protection, both physical and spiritual. It'll keep you alive when things get hairy, and trust me, they will. You're going to face choices that normal people never have to make. You're going to fight things that would make grown adults wet themselves. You're going to have to decide, again and again, what's worth protecting and what you're willing to sacrifice to protect it. But here's the thing, you're not alone. You've got friends who care about you, power that most people can only dream of, and the stubbornness that runs in our family. Use all three. The supernatural world is about to get a lot more complicated. There are forces out there that want to drag everything back to the old days when demons ruled through fear and humans were nothing but prey. Don't let them. Stay cocky, stay confident, and whatever you do, don't let anyone tell you that you can't protect the people you care about. Your grandfather, Dante P.S., try not to destroy too much property. The insurance paperwork is murder. I looked up from the letter to find everyone staring at me with expressions ranging from awe to concern. "So," I said, trying to inject some levity into the heavy atmosphere, "anyone want to help me figure out how to be a devil hunter?" That's when Akeno's phone buzzed with an urgent message. Her face went pale as she read it. "Riaz," she said, her voice tight with worry, "we have a problem. There's been an attack at the elementary school, multiple casualties, and the descriptions of the attackers match what Issei fought last night." My blood went cold. Kids, the emergency responders are calling it a gas leak explosion, but the supernatural cleanup crew found evidence of demonic activity. 3 of those creatures, maybe more. The rage that filled me then was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't the hot, impulsive anger I was used to. This was cold, focused, and absolutely lethal. I felt power surge through me, the boosted gear materializing on my arm without me even thinking about it. "We're going," I said, standing up. The coat swirled around me, and for a moment I could have sworn I saw Dante's reflection instead of my own. "Issei, wait," Ria started. "You're not ready for, those are kids, Rias." My voice came out harder than I'd ever heard it. "Whatever I'm ready for doesn't matter. What matters is that there are innocent people in danger." Koneko stepped forward. "He's right. And if there are more of those creatures, we need all the power we can get." "Then we do this together," Rias decided. "But Issei, you follow my lead. You're powerful, but you're still learning to control it." I nodded, though part of me, the part that was definitely not entirely human anymore, chafed at taking orders when people were in danger. The flight to the elementary school was a blur of worry and preparation. Rias explained that these creatures were different from normal demons, more savage, more primal. They seemed to be specifically targeting locations with large numbers of humans, trying to maximize fear and chaos. When we arrived at the school, the scene was even worse than I'd imagined. The building's entire west wing had been reduced to rubble, and emergency vehicles surrounded the area. But what the human authorities couldn't see were the 3 massive demons stalking through the Rekage, hunting for survivors. These creatures were even larger than the one I'd fought the night before. They moved with predatory grace despite their size, and their eyes burned with an intelligence that was somehow worse than mindless rage. "Remember," Ria said as we prepared to engage, "protect the humans first, fight second." "And Issei, I know," I interrupted. "Stay in control." But as I watched one of the demons corner a group of children who hadn't been evacuated yet, control was the last thing on my mind. "Boost," the boosted gear's voice echoed across the schoolyard. I launched myself forward, covering the distance between me and the demon in a heartbeat. This time, when the spectral sword materialized in my hand, it was solid, real, and crackling with energy that was both demonic and something else, something older and more primal. The demon turned toward me, its massive claws raised to strike down the cowering children. "Another Sparta whelp," it snarled. "You will die like your—" I didn't let it finish. The sword carved through the creature's arm like it was made of paper, severing the limb in a spray of black ichor. The demon's roar of pain and rage shook windows throughout the neighborhood. "Boost. Boost," power flooded through me with each activation of the sacred gear. But this time, it wasn't just draconic energy, it was mixing with something else, something that felt like liquid lightning in my veins. "Get the kids out of here," I shouted to Rias and the others as I engaged the wounded demon. This fight was different from the night before. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was hunting. Every movement the creature made, I could predict. Every attack, I could counter. It was like I'd been doing this my entire life. The demon lunged at me with its remaining claw, trying to disembowel me in a single strike. I sidestepped, grabbed its wrist, and used its own momentum to slam it into the ground hard enough to create a crater. Before it could recover, my sword was at its throat. "Who sent you?" I demanded. The demon laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "The pure ones rise again, little hunter. The old ways will return, and your mixed blood will be the key to—" I drove the blade through its neck, ending both its words and its existence. As it dissolved into black mist, I felt nothing, no guilt, no hesitation, just grim satisfaction that one more threat to innocent people had been eliminated. "Now that's more like it," the voice in my head approved. "You're finally starting to get it." "Issei," Ria's voice called out, "2 more incoming." I turned to see the remaining demons converging on the area where Kiba and Akeno were protecting a group of injured civilians. These creatures were smarter than the first. They were working together, trying to divide our attention. Boost, boost, boost. The power building inside me was reaching dangerous levels. I could feel it pushing against the limits of what my body could handle. But looking at those people in danger, at my friends fighting to protect them, I made a choice. Instead of restraining the power, I embraced it. But this time, I didn't just draw on the boosted gear's draconic energy. I reached for that other source of strength I could feel sleeping inside me, the legacy written into my very DNA. The transformation was instantaneous and overwhelming. White light erupted from my body as my hair turned completely silver and my eyes blazed with blue fire. The coat around me billowed as if caught in a supernatural wind, and when I moved, it was with inhuman speed and grace. I crossed the battlefield in the span of a heartbeat, appearing between the demons and my friends like I'd teleported. But I hadn't used magic, I'd simply moved faster than the eye could follow. Impossible, one of the demons breathed. The devil trigger, you cannot possess. My fist, crackling with combined demonic and draconic energy, caved in its chest before it could finish the sentence. The second demon tried to retreat, suddenly understanding that it was no longer the hunter in this scenario. I didn't let it escape. The fight was over in seconds. When the silver light faded and I returned to normal, I found myself standing in a field of black ash, the remains of creatures that had been terrorizing innocent people. "Issei," Ria said quietly, approaching me with a mixture of awe and concern. "What was that?" "I think," I said, looking down at my hands, which were still faintly glowing with residual energy, "that was me finally understanding what I inherited." The voice in my head chuckled with obvious pride. "Welcome to the family business, kid." As the emergency crews finished their work and the supernatural cleanup team erased any evidence of what had really happened, I found myself thinking about the demon's words. "The pure ones rise again." Whatever that meant, it didn't sound good. But for the first time since this whole supernatural mess had started, I felt ready for whatever came next. I had power, I had purpose, and I had people worth protecting. Let them come. 3 days had passed since the elementary school incident, and I still couldn't get the image out of my head, not of the demons I'd killed, but of the children's faces when they'd looked at me afterward. There had been fear there, yes, but also something else. Gratitude, relief, I wasn't sure what disturbed me more. I sat in my room, staring at Dante's coat hanging on my desk chair. The red leather seemed to pulse with its own inner light in the dim evening glow filtering through my window. Every time I looked at it, I heard that voice, his voice, echoing in my mind with increasing clarity. "Having second thoughts, kid?" "Maybe," I admitted aloud, knowing he could somehow hear me. "I mean, I killed them without hesitation. Shouldn't that bother me more than it does? You protected innocent people, that's what matters. The fact that you're questioning it means you haven't lost your humanity, devil blood or no devil blood." There was a soft knock at my bedroom door. "Issei, can I come in?" "Sure, Mom." My mother entered with her usual warm smile, carrying a tray with tea and some of her homemade cookies. But as she set it down on my nightstand, I caught her staring at my reflection in the mirror, specifically at the white streaks in my hair that had become more pronounced since the school incident. "Your hair is getting lighter," she observed, trying to keep her voice casual. "Yeah, it's a phase, I guess." She sat on the edge of my bed, her maternal instincts clearly picking up on my troubled mood. "You've been different lately, Issei." "More serious, more distant, more like a killer," I thought grimly. "I'm just dealing with some stuff at school," I said, which was technically true. My mother reached over and touched one of the white streaks. "Your father had hair like this when he was younger, you know, before it all turned brown. He said it was a family trait that skipped generations." I looked at her sharply. "Dad never mentioned that. There are a lot of things your father doesn't mention about his family." Her expression grew thoughtful. "Maybe it's time you asked him about it directly." After she left, I found myself staring at my reflection again. The blue flashes in my eyes were becoming more frequent, and sometimes, just for a moment, I could swear I saw someone else looking back at me. Someone older, more confident, with the same eyes but an entirely different presence. "You're finally starting to see me, aren't you?" This time, the voice wasn't Dante's. I spun around, but my room was empty, yet the presence lingered, colder than Dante's warmth, sharper, more demanding. "Virgil," I whispered, somehow knowing the name. "Very good, it seems my nephew has some intelligence after all. You're supposed to be dead. Death is complicated for our bloodline. As you're beginning to discover." The temperature in my room seemed to drop several degrees. Unlike Dante's spirit, which felt protective and encouraging, Virgil's presence was challenging, almost confrontational. "Dante coddles you with his philosophical nonsense about protecting the weak, but power, true power, comes from embracing what you are, not apologizing for it. And what exactly am I? Superior. You are the fusion of devil magic and Sparta blood, enhanced by a sacred gear that amplifies both. Yet you waste time feeling guilty about eliminating inferior creatures that threatened innocent lives." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Ria's. "Emergency club meeting, now." The occult research club room felt different when I arrived. The usual relaxed atmosphere had been replaced by visible tension. Ria stood behind her desk, her expression grave, while the others were arranged around the room like they were preparing for war. "Issei," Ria said as I entered, "we need to talk about what happened at the school." "What about it? We stopped the demons, saved the kids, mission accomplished." "That's not what I mean." She gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing. "Your power levels during that fight were concerning." "Concerning how?" Akeno spoke up from her position by the window. The energy readings we detected from you exceeded anything we've recorded from a newly turned devil. Even high-class devils don't typically display that kind of raw power. So I'm strong, isn't that a good thing? It would be, Ria said carefully, if we understood how to help you control it. But Issei, what you displayed wasn't just devil power, it was something else entirely. Kiba, who had been quietly polishing his sword, looked up. The way you moved, the techniques you used, none of that came from devil training. You fought like you'd been doing it your entire life. Because in a way you have been, Virgil's voice whispered in my mind. Our bloodline carries the memories of every battle our ancestors fought. You're not learning new techniques, you're remembering them. There's something else, Riaz continued. The Gremory family has been making inquiries about your background, about your father's true identity. My blood ran cold. And the name Antonio Redgrave appears in several supernatural records, more specifically, records related to the legendary devil hunter Dante. The room fell silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. So it's true, I said quietly. I really am Dante's grandson. Which means, Ria said, her voice strained, that you're not just my servant anymore, you're something far more significant in the supernatural world. And I'm not sure I can protect you from the attention that's going to bring. She's afraid of losing control over you, Virgil observed with obvious amusement. How pathetic. True power bows to no one. I felt a flash of anger not at Ria's but at Virgil's dismissive attitude. She's not trying to control me, she's trying to help me. What? Ria's looked confused. Nothing, I said quickly, realizing I'd responded to Virgil aloud. Just thinking through some things. Issei, Ria stepped closer, her expression soft with concern. I know this is a lot to process. The devil transformation, discovering your heritage, the responsibility that comes with both, I can handle it. Can you? The question came out sharper than she probably intended. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're changing into something I don't recognize, something that might not need a king to guide them. The hurt in her voice hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on understanding my new powers that I hadn't considered how my transformation might affect her. Riaz had saved my life, given me purpose, welcomed me into her family. And now I was pulling away from all of that because of a bloodline I'd never known existed. Riaz, an explosion rocked the school building, cutting off my words. The lights flickered, and through the windows we could see unnatural darkness spreading across the sky. Another attack, Akano said grimly. No, I corrected, feeling the familiar surge of hostile energy. This one's different, stronger. A lieutenant, Virgil's voice carried a note of interest. Finally, a worthy opponent. We rushed outside to find the school courtyard transformed into a hellscape. The concrete was cracked and blackened, twisted metal sculptures that had once been benches and trees dotted the landscape, and in the center of it all stood a demon unlike any I'd faced before. This creature was humanoid but clearly not human. Easily 7 feet tall, with pale gray skin covered in intricate black tattoos that seemed to move on their own. Its eyes burned with intelligent malice, and when it smiled, it revealed rows of razor-sharp teeth. Ah, it said in a cultured voice that was somehow worse than the bestial roars of the other demons, the young Sparta finally shows himself. I was beginning to think you were a coward like your grandfather. Dante was no coward, I snarled, feeling power surge through me. Not Dante, child, Sparta himself. The great betrayer who abandoned his own kind for the sake of weakling humans. The demon's laugh was like breaking glass. But perhaps you'll prove more. Interesting. Boost. The familiar surge of the boosted gear's power flowed through me, but this time it felt different. Instead of the usual draconic energy, it seemed to be amplifying something deeper, something that felt ancient and profound. Issei, wait, Riaz called out. We need to coordinate I was already moving. The demon was fast, faster than the others I'd fought, but I was faster. My spectral sword materialized just in time to parry its first strike, claws that could have torn through steel meeting ethereal blade with a shower of sparks. Good but not good enough, Virgil's voice whispered. You're holding back, embrace what you are. I know what I am, I said through gritted teeth as I ducked under another swipe. Do you? You're fighting like a devil trying to use hunter techniques. That's not what you are both simultaneously, and that makes you something entirely new. The demon pressed its attack, forcing me back toward where my friends were preparing their own offensive. I couldn't let it reach them, not when they didn't understand what we were really facing. Boost, boost. More power flooded through me, and with it came clarity. Virgil was right, I had been fighting like I was two separate things trying to work together. But that wasn't what I was a synthesis, something that had never existed before. I stopped retreating and let the demon's next attack come. At the last second, I sidestepped and grabbed its extended arm, using its momentum to flip it over my shoulder. But instead of just throwing it, I channeled both my devil power and my awakening hunter instincts into the motion. The result was devastating. The demon hit the ground with enough force to create a crater, and before it could recover, I was there, my spectral sword pressed against its throat. "You're finished," I said. "Am I?" The demon smiled. "Look around you, little hunter, see what your power has wrought." I glanced up and felt my heart stop. The courtyard around us was destroyed, not just from the demon's initial attack, but from our fight. Scorch marks in the shape of my footsteps dotted the ground, the air still shimmered with residual energy from my attacks, and several trees had been simply erased by the backlash from my power. "This is what happens when you stop holding back," the demon continued conversationally. "Power without control, strength without wisdom, you'll destroy everything you're trying to protect." "He's trying to get in your head," Dante's voice cut through Virgil's cold presence. "Don't listen to him." "No, listen carefully," Virgil contradicted. "He speaks truth even if his motives are corrupt. Power demands respect, power demands control, and power demands sacrifice." "Issei," Ria's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Something's wrong with your energy readings." I looked down at my hands and saw they were glowing with unstable light, not the steady glow of controlled power, but the chaotic flicker of something about to explode. "The balance breaker," I whispered, suddenly understanding. "It's trying to activate. Boost, 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 boost." The boosted gear was reacting to my emotional state, trying to push me past my limits. But instead of just doubling my devil power like it should, it was amplifying my hunter abilities as well, creating a feedback loop that was building toward something catastrophic. "Issei, you have to stop." Riaz was running toward me, but Akeno held her back. "No, don't get close to him. If that much power destabilizes." The world around me started to blur as energy continued building inside me. I could feel my consciousness splitting, part of me still human, part devil, part something else entirely. And at the center of it all, two voices warred for control. "Let it happen," Virgil urged. "Embrace the power. Become what you were meant to be." "Kid, you gotta find balance," Dante warned. "Power without heart is just destruction." "Balance," I repeated, the word cutting through the chaos in my mind. That was the key. Not choosing between my devil nature and my hunter heritage, but finding the point where they work together instead of fighting each other. I stopped trying to control the power and instead started trying to understand it. The devil energy wanted to corrupt, to dominate. The hunter energy wanted to destroy, to eliminate threats. But beneath both of those urges was something simpler, the desire to protect the people I cared about. The chaotic light around me began to stabilize, shifting from wild fluctuations to a steady, intense glow. When it faded, I was still me, but changed. My hair had gone completely silver, my eyes blazed with blue fire, and I could feel power flowing through me in perfect harmony. "Impossible," the demon breathed. "A perfect balance breaker on your first attempt, that should take years of training." "Maybe for someone who's only one thing," I said, raising my sword. "But I'm not just one thing." The battle that followed was brief but decisive. With my new understanding of my combined nature, I could access techniques that belonged to neither devils nor hunters but to something entirely new. I moved with inhuman speed and precision, struck with power that was both corrupting and purifying. And when it was over, the demon was nothing more than rapidly dispersing black mist. As the silver light faded and I returned to normal, I found myself face to face with Riaz. Her expression was unreadable, part pride, part concern, and part something else that might have been fear. "Issei," she said quietly, "we need to talk." "I know." I looked around at the devastation our fight had caused. "I'm getting stronger, but I'm also becoming something you didn't sign up for when you brought me back." "That's not..." She paused, searching for the right words. "I'm not afraid of what you're becoming, I'm afraid of losing you to it." The vulnerability in her voice made my chest tight. "Riaz, you're my first servant, Issei, my first real family member by choice rather than blood. And lately, it feels like you're slipping away from me, becoming something I can't reach." I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. The truth was that every day, I felt less like Issei Hyodo, the perverted high school student, and more like something else. Something with responsibilities that went far beyond school clubs and devil politics. "I don't know how to be both," I admitted. "The person you saved and the person I'm becoming." "Then figure it out," she said firmly. "Because I'm not giving up on you and I won't let you give up on yourself." "Touching," Virgil's voice commented dryly, "but sentiment won't help you when real threats emerge." "Actually, kid, she's got a point," Dante added. "The strongest hunters I ever knew were the ones who had something worth protecting." As we walked back toward the school building to check for any remaining threats, I found myself thinking about balance again. Not just the balance between my different types of power, but the balance between who I had been and who I was becoming. Maybe I didn't have to choose. Maybe I could be Dante's grandson and Ria's servant, a devil hunter and a devil, someone who protected people and someone who belonged to a family of supernatural beings who cared about him. "Hey Rias," I said as we reached the building's entrance. "Yes, thanks for not giving up on me." Her smile was radiant. "Never, Issei, we're family, remember, and family sticks together no matter how complicated things get." "Family," I repeated silently, and for the first time since this whole supernatural mess had started, that word felt like it meant something real. Behind us, the destroyed courtyard was already beginning to return to normal as the school's supernatural concealment systems kicked in. By tomorrow, it would look like nothing had happened, but I would remember. The power, the choice, the realization that I didn't have to sacrifice one part of myself for another. I was Issei Hyodo, grandson of Dante, servant of Ria's Gremory, devil hunter and devil. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly who I was supposed to be. The news spread through the supernatural world like wildfire. Within 48 hours of my encounter with the demon lieutenant, every major faction seemed to know that a new Sparta descendant had awakened in Q Academy. My phone had been buzzing non-stop with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The school's supernatural barriers were being tested by unknown entities almost hourly, and I'd started seeing strange figures watching me from the shadows during my daily routines. "This is getting ridiculous," I muttered, dodging yet another obviously supernatural stalker as I made my way to the club room after classes. The guy had been following me since lunch, trying way too hard to look casual while radiating enough demonic energy to power a small city. "Welcome to fame, kid," Dante's voice chuckled in my mind. "Hope you're ready for the attention that comes with the family name." "Attention he hasn't earned," Virgil's colder voice added. "Power without reputation is meaningless. You'll need to prove yourself worthy of the Sparta legacy." "Great," I said under my breath. "Advice from my dead grandfather and uncle, this is definitely normal." When I finally reached the occult research club room, I found it more crowded than usual. Ria's was behind her desk as always, but she was joined by several people I didn't recognize. A stern-looking woman in a business suit, a man with silver hair who radiated ancient power, and in the corner, someone who made my blood run cold just by being in the same room. The last figure was tall and elegant, with long silver hair and wearing what looked like an expensive tailored suit. But it was her eyes that caught my attention. They were ancient, predatory, and when she looked at me, I felt like a mouse being studied by a particularly intelligent cat. "Issei," Ria said, her voice carefully controlled, "we have some visitors who want to meet you." "Let me guess," I said, dropping my school bag by the door. "Word's gotten out about my heritage?" The woman in the business suit stepped forward. "Issei Hyodo, my name is Lady. I worked with your grandfather for many years." She paused, studying my face with obvious recognition. "You have his eyes. And apparently his talent for attracting trouble." "Lady," Dante's voice practically shouted in my head. "Damn, haven't seen her in years. Tell her I said she's still as beautiful as ever." "Dante says you're still as beautiful as ever," I relayed automatically, then immediately regretted it when everyone in the room stared at me. Lady's eyes widened slightly. "You can hear him. Long story, who are the others?" The silver-haired man stepped forward with a slight bow. "Surzech Lucifer, current Mao and Ria's older brother, the Gremory family has been concerned about recent developments." The elegant woman in the corner smiled, revealing fangs that definitely weren't human. "And I am Trish. I also knew your grandfather quite well." There was something in her tone that made me think their relationship had been complicated. "Right," I said, taking all this in. "So what's this about? Besides the obvious, hey, there's a new Sparta running around thing." Surzech exchanged glances with the others before speaking. "Issei, your existence has created ripples throughout the supernatural community. Every major faction is trying to decide whether you're an opportunity or a threat." "Threat how?" "The Sparta bloodline has a history of changing the balance of power," Trish explained, moving closer with that predatory grace. "Your grandfather single-handedly ended the demon-human war 2,000 years ago. Dante and Virgil both shaped the supernatural world in ways that are still felt today. And now there's you," Lady added. "A devil with Sparta blood and a sacred gear that seems to amplify both aspects of your nature. That combination is unprecedented." "They're scared," Virgil observed with obvious amusement. "Good. Fear breeds respect. Or it breeds people trying to kill you before you become a problem," Dante countered. "Kid, you need to be careful who you trust right now." "So what do you want from me?" I asked directly. "The church wants to recruit you," Surzech said grimly. The fallen angels are divided between wanting to eliminate you and wanting to use you. Several devil families are plotting to either marry you into their bloodlines or remove you as a potential threat to their political positions. And then there are the others, Lady said ominously. Others? Before anyone could answer, Koneko burst through the door, her usually stoic expression replaced by barely controlled panic. Something's coming, multiple powerful entities approaching the school from all directions. How many? Riaz demanded, immediately moving into crisis mode. At least a dozen, maybe more. The barriers are holding for now, but the lights in the room suddenly dimmed and the temperature dropped noticeably. Through the windows, I could see unnatural shadows spreading across the school grounds, moving against the direction of the sunlight. "They're here," Trish said, her casual demeanor instantly replaced by lethal readiness. "Who's here?" I demanded, but I think I already knew the answer. A voice echoed across the school grounds, amplified by supernatural means and dripping with malevolent authority. "Issei Hyodo, grandson of the traitor Sparta, come forth and face your betters." Pure demons, Virgil identified immediately. The old bloodlines that never accepted Sparta's betrayal of demonkind. "They've been waiting 2,000 years for a chance at revenge," Dante added grimly. "And now they think they've found it." "Why me specifically?" I asked as we prepared to head outside. "Because," Surzech said, materializing his demonic power around him like armor, "you represent everything they despise. Devil magic corrupting demon blood, cooperation with humans, protection of the weak. To them, you're an abomination that needs to be destroyed." Or, Trish added with a dangerous smile, converted to their cause. "Either way, this won't end peacefully." We rushed outside to find the school grounds transformed into a supernatural battlefield. The normally neat lawns were torn up, revealing strange symbols carved into the earth underneath. The air shimmered with heat distortion despite the cool autumn weather, and portal-like rifts were opening throughout the area. From these rifts emerged demons unlike any I'd faced before. These weren't the savage creatures I'd been fighting, these were clearly organized, intelligent, and ancient. They moved with military precision, forming ranks and creating a perimeter around the school. At their head stood a figure that made every instinct I possessed scream warnings. Tall and imposing, with midnight black skin covered in intricate silver markings that seemed to move on their own. His eyes burned with purple fire, and when he smiled, the air around him literally began to smoke. "Behold," he announced, his voice carrying clearly across the battlefield, "the so-called heir to the Sparta legacy." How? Disappointing. Boost. Power flooded through me as the boosted gear activated, but this time it felt different. The usual draconic energy was there, but it was mixing with something else, something that responded to the presence of these ancient demons with primal recognition. "You know," I called out, letting my spectral sword materialize in my hand, "I'm getting really tired of demons telling me how disappointing I am. Maybe try being more creative with your insults." The demon lord, because that's definitely what he was, laughed. "Insolence, just like your grandfather. Tell me, boy, do you even understand what you are? What power flows through your contaminated veins? Why don't you come over here and find out?" "Careful, kid," Dante warned. "This one's older than most of the demons I ever fought. He's got power to back up the attitude." "Good," Virgil said approvingly. "A worthy opponent will force you to grow stronger." The demon lord raised his hand, and the lesser demons around him began moving forward in perfect formation. But before they could reach us, barriers of light erupted around the school grounds. "Not so fast," Lady said, hefting a rocket launcher that definitely hadn't been there a moment before. "This is still a human institution. That means it's under our protection." "The church?" The demon lord's expression shifted to amused disdain. "How quaint, humans still think they have a voice in supernatural affairs." "This human," Trish said, her form beginning to shimmer with electrical energy, "happens to have experience killing your kind." The standoff stretched for a moment, both sides measuring the other's strength. Then the demon lord's gaze returned to me, and I felt something cold and calculating in his stare. "You have one chance, Sparta's heir. Join us willingly, embrace your true demonic nature, and help us reclaim what was stolen from demonkind 2 millennia ago. Refuse," he gestured to his forces, "and we will take what we want from your corpse." "Counteroffer," I said, letting my power build. "Boost, boost." The energy flowing through me was reaching dangerous levels, but this time I was ready for it. Instead of fighting the combination of devil and hunter power, I was learning to guide it, shape it into something new. I protect the people I care about, and right now that includes everyone in this school. I pointed my sword at the demon lord. "So if you want to fight, let's do this, but leave the innocent people out of it." "Innocent?" The demon lord's laugh was like breaking glass. "There are no innocents in this war, boy. Only the strong and the prey they consume." That's when he moved. I'd thought the previous demons were fast, but this was something else entirely. One moment he was 50 feet away, the next his claws were inches from my face. Only instinct saved me. I threw myself backward, bringing my sword up in a desperate parry. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground, creating a crater where I'd been standing. But I was already moving, muscle memory I'd never trained guiding my movements as I countered with a thrust aimed at his center mass. He deflected it casually, but I was already following up with a combination that seemed to flow from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. Strike, parry, dodge, counter. It was like I'd been fighting demons my entire life. There you go, Dante encouraged. Stop thinking and start feeling. The techniques are already in your blood, but even with inherited skills, I was clearly outmatched. The Demon Lord was faster, stronger, and had millennia of experience to draw on. Every exchange left me a little more off balance, a little closer to making a fatal mistake. Boost, boost. Boost? I pushed the boosted gear harder, feeling power levels spike beyond anything I'd achieved before. But instead of just raw enhancement, I tried something different. I focused the energy into a specific technique I somehow knew how to perform. Boosted Stinger? It was like Dante's signature move, but enhanced by draconic power. I launched forward with impossible speed, my sword extended like a spear. The Demon Lord's eyes widened slightly as he barely managed to dodge, my blade cutting through several strands of his silver hair. Impossible, he breathed. You cannot know techniques that were never taught to you. Guess I'm a fast learner, I said, pressing my attack. But my moment of advantage didn't last long. The Demon Lord recovered quickly, and his next assault was savage enough to drive me back despite my enhanced power. Enough games, he snarled, dark energy beginning to swirl around him. If you will not join us willingly, then you will serve as an example to any other would-be heroes. The energy he was gathering felt wrong, not just evil, but fundamentally opposed to existence itself. This wasn't just an attack. It was something designed to unmake whatever it touched. Before he could unleash it, though, a new voice cut across the battlefield. Hey, ugly, pick on someone your own size. I turned to see a young man with white hair and a blue coat leaping down from the school building. In his right hand was a sword that radiated power similar to my own spectral blade, and his left arm. His left arm was glowing with the same energy I'd felt from my devil transformation. Nero, Trish called out with obvious relief. About time you showed up. Sorry I'm late, Nero said, landing next to me with practiced ease. Traffic was hell, literally. He looked me over quickly. So you're the new family member everyone's talking about. Gotta say, you don't look like much. Thanks for the vote of confidence, I muttered. Don't mention it. Now want some advice on fighting ancient demon lords? I'm listening. Don't let them hit you with the big attacks, he said seriously, then grinned. Everything else you just make up as you go along. I like this kid, Dante said with obvious approval. The demon lord's expression had shifted from confident superiority to genuine concern. Another Sparta descendant. How many of you rats survived? Enough, Nero said, raising his sword. And we're all really tired of your kind, threatening innocent people. Innocent? The demon lord's voice was rising with fury. Your grandfather betrayed his own species for these worthless insects, and now you perpetuate his crimes. You know what? I said, feeling something settle into place inside me. I think I'm okay with that. Power flowed through me then, not the chaotic surge I'd been fighting to control, but something focused and purposeful. For the first time since my transformation, devil energy and hunter instincts worked together instead of fighting each other. The spectral sword in my hand solidified, becoming real and permanent. White light began emanating from my body as silver streaks spread through my hair. When I spoke, my voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there before. If protecting people makes me a traitor to demonkind, I said, then I guess I'm proud to be a traitor. The demon lord's response was a roar of pure rage that shattered every window in the school. But instead of being intimidated, I found myself grinning. Now that's the Sparta spirit, Dante said with obvious pride. About time, Virgil added, though I still question your priorities. Priorities like keeping my friends alive? I asked as Nero and I moved to flank the demon lord. If that's what drives you to power, then perhaps it will suffice. The battle that followed was unlike anything I'd experienced. Fighting alongside Nero felt natural, like we'd been doing it for years instead of minutes. Our attacks complemented each other perfectly, and when one of us was pressed, the other was always there to provide support. But even with both of us fighting together, the demon lord was holding his own. These ancient demons weren't just powerful, they were experienced in ways that neither Nero nor I could match. That's when the other demons decided to join the fight. Issei, Riaz called out as lesser demons began overwhelming the barriers Lady and Trish had established. We can't hold them all. I looked around the battlefield and realized the scope of what we were facing. This wasn't just an attack on the school, it was a coordinated assault designed to eliminate me and anyone who might protect me. Boost, 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 boost. Power beyond anything I'd ever achieved flooded through me. But this time, instead of trying to contain it, I let it flow through my connection to everyone I cared about. Rias, Akeno, Koneko, Kiba, all of them were fighting to protect me, and now it was my turn to protect them. Balance Breaker, Crimson Dragon Devil Hunter. The transformation was instantaneous and overwhelming. Silver light erupted from my body as my hair turned completely white and my eyes blazed with blue fire. The red coat from Dante materialized around me, but now it was enhanced with draconic scales and devil markings. In my hands, twin swords appeared, one spectral like before, the other solid and gleaming with contained power. When the light faded, the entire battlefield had gone silent. Impossible, the demon lord whispered. A perfect synthesis of all three bloodlines, devil, dragon, and Sparta. Yeah, I said, feeling power flow through me like liquid lightning. I'm kind of a big deal. The fight after that was brief but decisive. With my new form, I could match the demon lord's speed and strength while bringing techniques he'd never encountered before. The combination of devil magic, draconic enhancement, and inherited hunter skills created possibilities that neither side had prepared for. When it was over and the demon lord was dissolving into black mist like all the others, he managed one final warning. This changes nothing, hybrid. The pure demon king will not be denied. We will have our revenge against the Sparta line, even if we must destroy this entire realm to achieve it. As the portal rifts closed and the supernatural energies dissipated, I found myself surrounded by friends and allies who were looking at me with expressions ranging from awe to concern. So, Nero said, breaking the silence, welcome to the family business. Hope you're ready for it to get a lot more complicated from here. Looking around at the devastation we'd prevented, at the people we'd protected, and at the new allies who'd risked their lives to help me, I realized I was ready. Bring it on, I said, and meant it. The Sparta name came with a legacy of protection, sacrifice, and standing between the darkness and those who couldn't protect themselves. And despite everything, the voices in my head, the impossible power, the target on my back, I was proud to carry it. The aftermath of the pure demon attack left Q Academy looking like a war zone, despite the supernatural cleanup crews working overtime to repair the damage. 3 days later, I found myself in the most surreal meeting of my life, sitting at a conference table with representatives from every major supernatural faction in existence. The Gremory family estate's main conference room had been hastily converted into a war room. Maps covered every available surface, magical communication devices hummed with constant activity, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Or in my case, with one of my spectral swords. This is unprecedented, declared Gabriel, the archangel whose mere presence made the room feel like it was filled with warm honey and sunlight. Even I had to admit she was beautiful in a way that made my usual perverted thoughts seem almost blasphemous. Angels, devils, fallen angels, and devil hunters working together. Against a common enemy, Azazel interjected from across the table. The fallen angel leader looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but even he couldn't deny the severity of the situation. The pure demons aren't just targeting the Sparta bloodline anymore. They're trying to destabilize the entire supernatural balance. Which brings us to the elephant in the room, Sirzech said, his usually jovial demeanor replaced by serious concern. His gaze settled on me. Issei, you're not just a participant in this conflict anymore. Whether you like it or not, you've become the focal point. Kid's got a target painted on his back the size of Texas, Dante's voice chuckled in my mind. Welcome to the family business, emphasis on the business part. Power attracts enemies, Virgil added coldly. The question is whether you're strong enough to handle the attention. I can handle it, I said aloud, earning curious looks from several faction representatives who didn't understand I was responding to voices in my head. Can you? The question came from an unexpected source, Michael, the archangel who served as the de facto leader of heaven after God's departure. Because according to our intelligence, the pure demon king isn't just planning to eliminate you. He wants to use your unique bloodline for something far worse. Lady, who had been quietly studying reconnaissance photos, looked up with grim expression. We've been tracking their movements since the school attack. They're not just recruiting demons anymore, they're awakening things that have been sealed for millennia. What kind of things? Riaz asked, though from her expression, she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Trish materialized a holographic display in the center of the table, showing a map dotted with red markers. Ancient battlefields where Sparta fought during the original demon-human war. Sites where the barriers between realms are naturally thin, places where my grandfather's blood was spilled, I finished, understanding hitting me like a physical blow. Exactly. They're using those locations as focal points to weaken the dimensional barriers, but the process requires a catalyst, specifically the blood of a Sparta descendant who's been corrupted by demonic power. My devil transformation, I realized. They don't just want to kill me, they want to corrupt me first. Nero, who had been leaning against the wall with characteristic casual confidence, straightened up. Over my dead body. We've lost too much family to these bastards already. That's exactly what they're counting on, Azazel said grimly. Emotional responses, predictable reactions. They've been planning this for 2,000 years. They know how we think, how we fight, how we protect what we care about. Gabriel leaned forward, her expression troubled. There's more. Our seers have been having visions, glimpses of a possible future where the pure demons succeed. The barriers don't just weaken, they collapse entirely. Meaning, I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Meaning the original demon realm merges with the human world, Michael said heavily. Billions of humans die in the first wave. The supernatural factions are overwhelmed. Everything we've built, everything we've protected. Gone, the room fell silent. Even with all the power I'd gained, the responsibility that was being placed on my shoulders felt overwhelming. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, kid, Dante's voice was unusually serious. But that's the price of having the strength to make a difference. So what's the plan? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Alliance, Surzech said simply. Complete cooperation between all factions for the first time in recorded history. Shared intelligence, coordinated training, joint operations. Angels working with devils, Gabriel mused. The church cooperating with devil hunters. Fallen angels fighting alongside their former brothers and sisters. She shook her head. 6 months ago, I would have said it was impossible. 6 months ago, we didn't have a pure demon king trying to end the world, Azazel pointed out. Sometimes impossible becomes necessary. Which brings us to the practical considerations, Lady said, pulling out what looked like a training schedule that would make a military drill sergeant weep. Issei, you need to learn to use your abilities properly, not just the raw power but the techniques, the strategies, the teamwork required for what's coming. I'm listening. Multi-faction training program. Devils will teach you advanced magical theory and energy manipulation. Angels will help you understand the purification aspects of your power. Fallen angels can show you how to use corruption abilities defensively. And the devil hunters, she grinned, will teach you how to kill things that really don't want to die. Akano, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up with concern. That's a lot of conflicting methodologies. How do we know they won't interfere with each other? We don't, Trish admitted. This is all theoretical. No one's ever tried to train someone with Issei's unique combination of abilities. Then we make it up as we go along, I said, feeling a familiar surge of determination. It's worked for me so far. That's the spirit, Dante approved. When in doubt, improvise. Improvisation without preparation is simply failure waiting to happen, Virgil countered. You need structure, discipline, proper training. I need both, I said aloud, earning more confused looks. Sorry, family consultation. Riaz raised an eyebrow but didn't press. How long do we have to prepare? Intelligence suggests they'll need at least 3 more major ritual sites to complete their plan, Lady reported. But they're moving faster now that they know we're organized against them. Maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks to master centuries of supernatural combat techniques, Nero said with dark humor. No pressure. Actually, Gabriel said thoughtfully, there might be a way to accelerate the process. Every eye in the room turned to her. Shared experience training. We establish a mental link between Issei and experienced fighters from each faction. Not just instruction, but actual combat memory transfer. That's incredibly dangerous, Michael warned. Mental links with that many different types of beings, the psychic strain alone could be lethal. Everything about this situation is dangerous, I pointed out, but if it means I can protect people, I'm willing to try. Riaz stood up abruptly. Absolutely not. Issei, you're talking about letting strangers into your mind, sharing memories with beings whose mental structures are completely different from yours. The risk of permanent damage is acceptable, I interrupted gently. Riaz, I appreciate that you're trying to protect me, but billions of lives are at stake. My safety doesn't outweigh that. It does to me, she said quietly, and something in her voice made my chest tight. The room watched our exchange with obvious interest. I could see calculation in some expressions, sympathy in others, and what might have been approval from Nero. There's another factor to consider, Azazel said, breaking the tension. The mental link process would also create a permanent psychic bond between all participants. You'd be sharing more than just combat memories, emotions, experiences, potentially deep personal information. A supernatural group consciousness, Gabriel mused. It's been theorized but never attempted, because it's incredibly risky, Michael emphasized, but given the circumstances. How risky? I asked. Worst case scenario, Trish said bluntly, complete mental breakdown. Your consciousness could fragment beyond repair, or you could become a composite personality made up of pieces from everyone involved. Best case scenario, you gain the combined combat experience of some of the most powerful beings in existence, along with an unbreakable mental connection to allies who can coordinate with you perfectly in battle. I looked around the room, weighing the options. Who would be involved? Myself, Lady said immediately. Nero, one representative from each major faction plus your existing peerage members if they're willing. I'm in, Riaz said without hesitation. As am I, Akeno added. Obviously, Koneko said in her usual deadpan tone. It would be an honor, Kiba said with his characteristic politeness. Then we have our core group, Surzech said. The question is timing. When do we attempt this? Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the estate. Red lights flashed and magical barriers snapped into place around the building. Attack? Azazel asked, already summoning his power. No, Lady said, checking her communication device. Intelligence report, priority 1. A holographic display materialized showing surveillance footage from what looked like an abandoned industrial complex. Dozens of pure demons were gathered around a massive ritual circle carved into the concrete floor. At the center of the circle was something that made my blood run cold. It was a person, or had been. Now it was something else, something that writhed with corrupt energy and screamed with voices that weren't entirely human. They're not waiting for more ritual sites, Trish said grimly. They're experimenting with artificial catalysts. Human test subjects, Gabriel whispered, her face pale with horror. Hundreds of them, Michael confirmed, his usual calm completely shattered. Men, women, children. They're trying to force a breakthrough using sheer quantity instead of quality. I felt rage building inside me, not the hot, impulsive anger I was used to, but something cold and implacable. Where? Abandoned factory district on the outskirts of the city, but Issei, this is clearly a trap. They want us to respond emotionally, to rush in without proper preparation. Then we don't rush, I said, my voice carrying harmonics I'd never heard before. We go in prepared, coordinated, and we end this. Now you're thinking like a true devil hunter, Dante approved. About time, Virgil added, righteous fury focused through strategic thinking. This is what power should look like. The mental link process, I said, turning to face the assembled representatives. How long does it take? If we push it, 6 hours, Gabriel said, but the risks are acceptable. We do it now, then we hit them with everything we've got. Riaz stepped closer to me. Issei, once we do this, there's no going back. You won't just be our friend anymore, you'll be connected to all of us permanently. I looked around the room at the faces of people who had become incredibly important to me over the past few weeks. Devils who had welcomed me into their family. Angels who had chosen to trust someone they should consider an enemy. Fallen angels who were risking everything to protect a world that had never shown them kindness. Devil hunters who were treating me like blood family despite barely knowing me. I can think of worse fates, I said. The next 6 hours were the most intense experience of my life. The mental link process was like having my consciousness torn apart and rebuilt with pieces from 8 other beings. For a while, I wasn't sure where Issei ended and the others began. I experienced Ria's first nervous day as a king, feeling her determination to be worthy of the Gremory name. I lived through Akeno's complicated relationship with her fallen angel heritage, understanding for the first time why she sometimes seemed so sad. I felt Koneko's fierce loyalty beneath her stoic exterior and Kiba's ongoing struggle with his traumatic past. From the angels, I gained Gabriel's unwavering faith in the possibility of redemption and Michael's heavy burden of leadership in God's absence. Azazel's memories showed me the loneliness of being cast out from heaven, but also the freedom that came with choosing your own path. Lady's experiences were the most familiar, years of hunting demons, the satisfaction of protecting innocent people, the weight of seeing too much darkness. And Nero's memories felt like looking in a mirror. The same struggle to live up to a family legacy, the same determination to protect the people he cared about, the same willingness to sacrifice everything for what was right. When the process was complete, I could feel all of them as constant presences in the back of my mind. Not intrusive, but available. ready to provide advice, support, or just the comfort of knowing I wasn't alone. "How do you feel?" Riaz asked, her voice carrying both through the air and through our new mental connection. "Different," I admitted. "Stronger, like I'm part of something bigger than myself." "You are," Gabriel said softly. "We all are now." The sun was setting as our newly formed alliance prepared for battle. Every faction had contributed their best fighters, and for the first time in supernatural history, angels and devils fought side by side without reservation. The abandoned factory was exactly as horrific as the surveillance footage had suggested. Hundreds of human test subjects were suspended in some kind of energy field, their life force being slowly drained to power the ritual. At the center of it all, the pure demon king waited with obvious confidence. "Sparta's heir," he called out as we approached, "how thoughtful of you to bring such a collection of allies. Their deaths will add considerable power to our working." "Counteroffer," I said, my twin swords materializing in my hands. "You release the prisoners, dismantle your ritual, and maybe I'll make your death quick." His laughter was like breaking glass. "Such confidence, let's see how long it lasts." The battle that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. With the mental link active, our coordination was perfect. I could anticipate my allies' moves before they made them, and they could respond to my strategies before I fully formed them. Riaz and I moved like we'd been fighting together for years, her destructive magic perfectly complementing my close combat abilities. Akaino's lightning strikes hit exactly where I needed them, while Koneko provided support that seemed to anticipate threats before they materialized. The angels brought purification abilities that could actually harm pure demons in ways our other attacks couldn't. Gabriel's light-based attacks cut through their defenses like they weren't there, while Michael's strategic command kept our forces coordinated despite the chaos. Azazel proved that fallen angels hadn't lost any of their combat effectiveness, his corruption-based attacks creating openings that the rest of us could exploit. Lady and Nero fought with the precision and ruthlessness that only came from years of professional demon hunting. But the pure demon king was everything the legends had suggested and more. Even with all of us working together, he was holding his own, and the ritual continued in the background. Boost, 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 boost. I pushed the boosted gear beyond anything I'd attempted before, drawing not just on my own power but on the strength flowing through the mental link. For the first time, I felt like I could access the full potential of my unique heritage. Balance Breaker, Crimson Dragon Devil Hunter, the transformation was different this time. Instead of just my own power, I could feel contributions from everyone connected to me. Ria's demonic energy, Gabriel's purification light, Akaino's lightning, Virgil's precision, Dante's adaptability, all of it flowed together into something entirely new. When the light faded, I was something unprecedented. Not just a devil with hunter abilities, but a synthesis of every positive aspect of the supernatural world. The pure demon king's confident expression finally showed genuine concern. "Impossible," he breathed. "You cannot channel that many different types of power simultaneously." "Watch me," I said and moved. The fight was brief but decisive. With perfect coordination from my allies and power drawn from every major supernatural faction, the pure demon king found himself overwhelmed for the first time in millennia. As he dissolved into black mist, his final words carried a promise. "This changes, nothing, others will come, the old ways will return." But as we freed the prisoners and dismantled the ritual circle, I found myself feeling genuinely hopeful for the first time since this whole mess had started. "First major victory," Nero said, clapping me on the shoulder. "How does it feel to save the world?" I looked around at my allies, no, my family, and realized the pure demon king had been wrong about one thing. This had changed everything. Not just the supernatural balance of power, but the possibility of what we could accomplish when we worked together instead of against each other. "It feels like a good start," I said. But even as we celebrated, intelligence reports were already coming in about pure demon activity at other locations. The war was far from over. The intelligence came in at 3 in the morning. I was in the middle of a training session with Nero, practicing advanced sword techniques in the Gremory Estate's reinforced practice hall, when every communication device in the building started screaming simultaneously. The mental link I shared with the others exploded with urgent messages, overlapping voices creating a cacophony of alarm that made my head ring. "Issei," Ria's voice cut through the mental chaos. "Emergency meeting." Now, Nero and I rushed to the main conference room to find it in controlled chaos. Gabriel was coordinating with angelic reconnaissance teams through multiple holographic displays, while Azazel worked frantically at a communication array that was crackling with static. Lady stood over a map table, her expression grim, and Trish was speaking rapidly into what looked like an ancient crystalline communication device. "What's happening?" I asked as Riaz, Akeno, Koneko, and Kiba filed in behind us. "We found them," Lady said without preamble, "the Pure Demon King's main stronghold, but that's not the worst part." She activated a central holographic display that showed aerial surveillance footage. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was a massive underground complex, clearly ancient but recently expanded. Hundreds of pure demons moved through corridors carved from living rock, but they weren't alone. At regular intervals throughout the complex, I could see cages, dozens of them, each containing what looked like human prisoners. "They're not using artificial catalysts anymore," Trish reported, her voice tight with controlled fury. "They're using actual humans, men, women, children, thousands of them." "From where?" Akeno asked, her usual playful demeanor completely absent. "Missing persons reports from across Japan and several neighboring countries," Gabriel said, her celestial composure cracking. "They've been systematically kidnapping people for months. We just didn't connect the pattern until now." "Those bastards," Dante's voice snarled in my mind, "using innocent people as ingredients." "Kid, this stops now. Emotional responses lead to tactical errors," Virgil warned coldly. "You must think strategically, not reactively." "Show me the ritual site," I said, my voice carrying harmonics I'd never heard before. Lady manipulated the display, zooming in on the complex's heart. What I saw there defied comprehension. A vast circular chamber had been carved from the bedrock, easily the size of a football stadium. Intricate symbols covered every surface, floor, walls, ceiling, all glowing with malevolent energy. At the chamber's center was a raised platform where a figure I recognized as the Pure Demon King stood over what looked like an altar. Suspended above the altar, held in place by chains of dark energy, was a single prisoner. The prisoner was small, young, and very much alive. "They're starting with children," I said, and something cold and terrible settled in my chest. "Gets worse," Azazel said grimly. "Our intelligence suggests this is just the beginning. They need 3 types of sacrifice to complete their ritual: innocent blood to weaken the barriers, corrupt blood to twist the dimensional fabric, and Sparta blood to bind it all together," I finished. "They're not just trying to merge the realms, they want to make it permanent." "Correct." Michael's voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. "If they succeed, the damage won't just affect our dimension. The corruption will spread to every connected reality. Heaven, the various underworlds, the human realm, all of it will become part of their twisted domain." Kiba stepped forward, his usual politeness replaced by steel determination. "Then we stop them, full assault, maximum force." "It's not that simple," Lady said, pulling up tactical schematics. "The complex is warded against every type of attack we can bring to bear. Angels can't approach directly because of corruption fields, devils are weakened by purification barriers, fallen angels face both types of interference." "And devil hunters," I asked. "Are specifically expected," Trish admitted. "They've prepared countermeasures for every technique in our arsenal. This whole setup is designed to neutralize our traditional advantages." The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. "There's more bad news," Gabriel said quietly. "Our seers have determined the timing. They're not waiting for more prisoners or better conditions. The ritual begins in 6 hours. 6 hours to infiltrate an impregnable fortress and stop a ritual that could end reality as we know it," I said through the mental link to avoid speaking aloud. "Anyone have any bright ideas?" "Actually, yes," came an unexpected response from Koneko, "but you're not going to like it." All eyes turned to her. Koneko rarely spoke during tactical discussions, but when she did, it was usually important. "The wards are designed to keep armies out," she said in her usual monotone. "But a small infiltration team might be able to slip through their defenses, especially if that team included someone they specifically want to capture." "You're talking about using me as bait," I realized. "Tactical bait," she corrected. "They want your blood for the ritual. If you approach openly, they'll bring you to exactly where you need to be." "It's insane," Riaz said through the mental link, her mental voice tight with worry. "You'd be walking into a trap with no backup." "Who said anything about no backup?" Nero interjected, grinning despite the situation. "Kids got a point. They expect an army, so we don't give them one. Small team, surgical strike, maximum chaos." "The mental link," I said suddenly, understanding clicking into place. "We don't need traditional communication or coordination. A small team connected through the psychic bond could operate with perfect synchronization." 5 people, Lady said, already running calculations. "Any more and we risk detection. Any fewer and we won't have enough firepower to handle what we'll face." I'm obviously going, I said. Who else? Me, Ria said immediately. And me, Akeno added. I'm the fastest, Koneko pointed out logically. You'll need someone who can extract prisoners while you handle the main threat. That leaves one more slot, Nero observed. Before anyone could volunteer, Kiba stepped forward. It should be me. Kiba, I started. Hear me out, he interrupted, his usual gentle demeanor replaced by something harder. My sacred gear is specifically designed to counter supernatural defenses. If their wards are as comprehensive as we think, you'll need someone who can create openings for the others. I looked around the room, seeing the concern and determination on everyone's faces. These people had become my family, and now I was asking some of them to walk into what was probably a suicide mission. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, Dante's voice reminded me gently. Leadership requires difficult choices, Virgil added. The needs of the many must outweigh the needs of the few. All right, I said finally. 5-person infiltration team. We go in fast, hit them hard, and get those prisoners out. Everyone else coordinates external support and extraction. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Equipment checks, contingency planning, final communications with various supernatural authorities. But through it all, I could feel a growing sense of dread that had nothing to do with the upcoming mission. Something was wrong, not with our plans or preparations, but something deeper. The voices in my head, Dante and Virgil, had been unusually quiet since we'd started planning. When they did speak, their words carried an undertone I couldn't identify. Kid, Dante's voice finally said as I was suiting up in the red coat, there's something you need to know about this ritual. What about it? The reason they need specifically your blood. It's not just because you're a Sparta descendant with devil power, there's something else, something your father never told you. I paused in the middle of checking my weapons. What kind of something? Your existence wasn't an accident. The timing, the circumstances, even your parents' meeting. It was all arranged. Arranged by who? By us, by Sparta actually before he disappeared. He foresaw this threat and made preparations. The world seemed to tilt sideways. You're saying I was created to fight these things? Not created, guided. Your father was led to Japan for a reason. Your mother was chosen for her specific bloodline traits. Even your devil transformation by Ria's was influenced by forces beyond any of your understanding. In essence, Virgil's voice added coldly, you are not just a weapon against the pure demons. You are the weapon. Designed specifically to counter their ritual and destroy their plans. Which means what exactly? It means, Dante said gently, that you're going to have to make a choice today that goes beyond just saving prisoners or stopping a ritual. You're going to have to decide whether you're willing to fulfill the purpose you were designed for. Before I could ask what that meant, Ria's voice called out, Issei, it's time. The infiltration went exactly as planned for the first 20 minutes. We approached the complex through underground tunnels that Koneko's enhanced senses had identified as unguarded. Kiba's sacred gear made short work of the detection wards, while Ria's provided magical concealment for our movements. Akeno kept watch through electromagnetic senses, and I tried to ignore the growing certainty that something terrible was about to happen. The complex was even larger on the inside than the surveillance footage had suggested. Corridor after corridor stretched through the carved rock, lit by an eerie bioluminescence that seemed to pulse with its own life. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur and something else, something organic and wrong. Too easy, I said through the mental link as we made our way toward the central chamber. Where are all the guards? Maybe they're all at the ritual site, Akeno suggested, but I could feel her doubt through the connection. That's when we found the first cage. It was tucked into an alcove off the main corridor, barely visible in the dim light. Inside were 3 people, a middle-aged man, a young woman, and a child who couldn't have been more than 10. They were unconscious but alive, suspended in some kind of energy field that kept them motionless. There are dozens of these, Koneko reported, having scouted ahead. Hundreds of prisoners, all in similar conditions. We can't save them all during the infiltration, Ria said reluctantly, not if we want to stop the ritual. We save who we can on the way out, I decided. First priority is stopping the main ceremony. As we continued deeper into the complex, the sense of wrongness grew stronger. It wasn't just the evil magic or the demonic presence, it was something more fundamental. Like reality itself was being twisted by whatever was happening in the central chamber. That's when we heard the screaming. It was coming from ahead of us, echoing through the stone corridors with a sound that made my bones ache. Not just pain, but despair, the sound of someone facing something infinitely worse than death. The ritual started, Kiba said grimly. We need to move, now. We abandoned stealth for speed, racing through corridors that seemed to shift and change around us. The screaming grew louder, joined by other sounds, chanting in languages that predated human civilization, the crackle of unnatural energies, and underneath it all, a low thrumming that felt like the heartbeat of something vast and malevolent. When we finally reached the central chamber, what we found was worse than anything I could have imagined. The ritual was indeed underway. The pure demon king stood at the center of the massive circular space, his arms raised as dark energy poured from dozens of subsidiary altars arranged around the chamber's perimeter. Each altar held a prisoner, not just humans, but beings from every supernatural faction. Devils, angels, fallen angels, even what looked like other demons who had opposed the pure demon agenda. But it was the central altar that made my blood freeze. Suspended above it, held in place by chains of pure malevolence, was Akaino. Not the Akaino standing next to me, I could feel her shock and horror through the mental link. This was another Akaino, one whose eyes held the glazed look of someone whose mind had been broken by torture and despair. Impossible, Ria's breathed. She's right here with us. How can she be? Time manipulation, I realized with growing horror. They grabbed her from our timeline and brought her here. She's been their prisoner for who knows how long. The pure demon king's laughter echoed through the chamber. Ah, the young Sparta arrives at last, and he's brought friends. How? Expected. Light erupted throughout the chamber, revealing that we were surrounded. Dozens of pure demons emerged from concealment, cutting off every exit. But worse than the tactical disadvantage was what I could see happening to the Akaino on the altar. She was dying, slowly, agonizingly, as her life force was drained to power the ritual. And from the progression of the magical circles carved into the chamber floor, I could tell we only had minutes before the process became irreversible. Choose wisely, Sparta's heir, the pure demon king called out, his voice echoing with supernatural amplification. Rush to save your friend and fail to stop the ritual that will doom billions. Stop the ritual and watch her die knowing you could have prevented it. It's a trap, Virgil's voice said coldly. An obvious manipulation designed to force an emotional response. Kid, Dante added more gently, sometimes you can't save everyone, sometimes you have to choose the greater good. But looking at Akaino, the broken, tortured version suspended above the altar, I realized something that both voices in my head had missed. I wasn't going to choose, I was going to save everyone. Boost, 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 boost. Power flooded through me, but this time I didn't just draw on my own abilities. Through the mental link, I reached out to every ally connected to our psychic network. Not just the four with me in the chamber, but everyone back at the coordination center. Angels, devils, fallen angels, devil hunters, all of them. For the first time since gaining my powers, I stopped holding back completely. Balance breaker, crimson dragon devil hunter, the transformation was different this time. Instead of just my own power evolving, I felt the abilities of everyone connected to the mental link flowing through me. I wasn't just a devil with hunter abilities anymore. I was a living embodiment of every positive aspect of the supernatural world. When the light faded, I was something unprecedented. My hair had turned completely silver, my eyes blazed with multicolored fire, and the red coat around me billowed with energy drawn from dozens of different sources. In my hands were not just the twin swords I'd grown accustomed to, but weapons that seemed to shift and change based on what I needed them to be. Impossible, the pure demon king breathed. No single being can channel that much diverse power. You're right, I said, my voice carrying harmonics from every person connected to our mental network. I'm not a single being anymore. I'm all of us. What followed was the most intense battle of my life. But instead of facing it alone, I fought with the combined skill and experience of every ally in our network. I moved with Koneko's speed, struck with Kiba's precision, defended with Ria's tactical awareness, and attacked with the accumulated knowledge of generations of devil hunters. The pure demons surrounding us found themselves facing not just 5 infiltrators, but a coordinated assault that seemed to anticipate their every move. Through the mental link, we achieved perfect tactical synchronization. But even with all that power, I quickly realized the scope of what we were facing. The pure demon king wasn't just strong, he was drawing energy from the ritual itself, becoming more powerful with every second that passed. And Akaino was still dying. I have an idea, the real Akaino said through the mental link, but you're not going to like it. I'm listening. The ritual requires specific types of sacrifice, right? Innocent blood, corrupt blood, and Sparta blood. But what if we gave them something they weren't expecting? Before I could ask what she meant, Akaino broke from our formation and launched herself directly at the central altar. Not to attack the pure demon king, but to take the place of her tortured alternate self. Akeno, no, I shouted, but she was already moving. The ritual needs willing sacrifice from someone connected to a Sparta descendant, she explained as she flew toward the altar. Let them have it, but on our terms, not theirs. I understood then what she was planning, and my heart nearly stopped. She wasn't just going to substitute herself for the other Akeno, she was going to willingly offer herself as sacrifice, trusting that I could use that willing gift to turn the ritual against the pure demons. Boost, 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 boost. Power beyond anything I'd ever achieved flooded through me. But this time, it wasn't just draconic energy or devil magic or hunter abilities. It was something new, the power that came from someone willingly sacrificing themselves so that others could live. Akeno reached the altar just as the pure demon king realized what she was doing. His roar of rage shook the entire chamber, but it was too late. The ritual circles were already reacting to her presence, drawing her into the magical matrix. But instead of the corrupt energy the pure demons had been expecting, Akeno's willing sacrifice created something entirely different. Light, pure, cleansing light began to pour from the ritual circles, burning away the corruption that had been building there. No, the pure demon king screamed. The ritual cannot be purified. It is impossible. Nothing's impossible, I said, feeling power beyond measurement flowing through me, not when people are willing to sacrifice everything for each other. The battle that followed was brief but decisive. With the ritual turned against them, the pure demons found their own power being drained and purified. The pure demon king, cut off from the corrupt energy he'd been drawing on, was no match for my transformed state. When it was over and the last of the pure demons had been reduced to cleansing light, I found myself kneeling beside the altar where Akeno lay unconscious but alive. The tortured alternate version had disappeared, whether rescued or simply erased by the timeline correction, I couldn't tell. Is she? Riaz asked, her voice thick with worry. She's alive, I confirmed, though I could feel that the ordeal had cost her greatly. But we need to get her medical attention immediately. As we began the process of freeing the other prisoners and evacuating the complex, I found myself thinking about what Dante and Virgil had told me. About being designed for this purpose, about choices and destiny and the weight of inherited responsibility. Maybe I had been created for this. Maybe my entire existence had been guided by forces beyond my understanding. But looking at Akeno's pale face, at the hundreds of prisoners we were rescuing, at my friends who had been willing to risk everything to save innocent people, I realized I was okay with that. If this was my purpose, protecting people, standing between the darkness and those who couldn't protect themselves, then it was a purpose I could be proud of. The pure demon threat wasn't over. I could feel that much through the magical residue left by the failed ritual. But for the first time since this whole supernatural mess had started, I felt like we had a real chance of winning. Because we weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for each other, and that made all the difference. The first sign that something was catastrophically wrong came 3 days after we'd rescued the prisoners from the pure demon ritual site. I was in the middle of helping Akeno with her recovery. The ordeal of being used as a ritual sacrifice, even briefly, had left her weakened and struggling with nightmares when reality simply hiccuped. One moment we were sitting in the Gremory Estate's garden, enjoying the afternoon sunshine as she worked through a series of gentle magical exercises designed to restore her energy flow. The next moment, the sky above us was a swirling mass of colors that definitely didn't belong to any earthly sunset. And the ground beneath our feet was shifting between the manicured grass of the estate and what looked like rough volcanic stone. Issei, Akeno said quietly, her voice strangely calm despite the impossible sight above us, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. Kid, you need to get inside. Now, Dante's voice exploded in my mind with an urgency I'd never heard before. The barriers are collapsing. Reality is starting to bleed between dimensions. This is what we feared would happen, Virgil added, his mental voice carrying genuine alarm. The pure demon's failed ritual didn't just fail, it damaged the fundamental structure between realms. Before I could respond, the air around us began to shimmer, and through the distortion I could see other places. A glimpse of what looked like a burning city that definitely wasn't anywhere on Earth. A flash of crystalline spires that hurt to look at directly, and something that might have been a vast library filled with books that were writing themselves. The dimensional barriers, I whispered, understanding hitting me like a physical blow. They're not just weakening, they're breaking down completely. Which means, Akeno asked, though from her expression she was already figuring it out. Which means every supernatural realm that has ever existed is about to occupy the same space as the human world, I said grimly. Heaven, the various underworlds, demon dimensions, fairy realms, all of it, trying to exist in the same reality simultaneously. The mental link I shared with the others suddenly erupted with panic communications. Emergency at Kyo Academy, Ria's voice cut through the psychic chaos. The school is partially overlapping with what looks like, I don't even know how to describe it. Angel Scouts reporting massive reality distortions across 7 prefectures, Gabriel added, her usual serenity replaced by barely controlled alarm. Civilian casualties are mounting. This is worse than we thought, Lady's voice was grim. It's not just Japan, we're getting reports of dimensional overlaps from around the globe. Through the mental link, I could feel the growing panic from every member of our alliance. This wasn't something that could be fought with swords or magic, this was reality itself coming apart at the seams. We need to get back to the coordination center, I said, helping Akeno to her feet. If the barriers are collapsing everywhere then, the ground beneath us lurched, and suddenly we were no longer in the Gremory Estate's garden. Instead, we found ourselves standing in what looked like a vast desert under a sky filled with 3 different moons. In the distance, I could see the estate's main building, but it was wrong. Parts of it seemed to be made of crystal, other sections appeared to be carved from living wood, and the entire structure was flickering between different architectural styles. Dimensional overlap, Akeno said with the clinical detachment she used when dealing with magical theory. Multiple realities trying to occupy the same space. The physical laws can't reconcile the differences, so everything becomes unstable. And it's going to get worse, Virgil's voice warned. This is just the beginning. As more realms overlap, the contradictions will compound. Eventually what? I asked aloud, earning a confused look from Akeno. Eventually, reality collapses entirely. Not just the barriers between dimensions, but the fundamental forces that keep existence coherent. Time, space, causality, all of it becomes meaningless. A new voice cut through my mental conversation with the spirits, one I didn't recognize, but that carried authority that made my bones ache. Unless someone with the right combination of abilities stabilizes the dimensional matrix from the inside. Who was that? I asked. That, Dante said with what sounded like a mixture of pride and sadness, was your great-grandfather. Sparta himself? The implications hit me like a freight train. You're saying I was literally designed for this, not just to fight the pure demons, but to fix whatever they broke. The bloodline carries certain capabilities, Sparta's ancient voice explained. Devil magic can manipulate dimensional barriers. Dragon power can enforce stability across multiple realities, and the techniques of a devil hunter. Those can cut through the contradictions that are preventing the realms from separating properly. But I don't know how to do any of that. You do, you simply haven't accessed the knowledge yet. But as reality continues to collapse, the memories will surface. The question is whether you can handle them without losing yourself in the process. Before I could ask what that meant, the desert around us flickered and was replaced by what looked like a medieval marketplace. Then a modern city street. Then an underwater palace. Each transition was jarring, disorienting, and accompanied by the distant screams of people who were definitely not prepared for their reality to keep changing. Issei, Akeno said, grabbing my arm, we need to find the others. If this is happening everywhere, then people are going to need help adapting to whatever this is. She was right, but as we started moving toward where the estate building kept flickering in and out of existence, I could feel something else building inside me. Not just power, but knowledge, techniques, and understanding that belonged to generations of my bloodline stretching back millennia. It's starting, Dante observed. The inheritance awakening. Kid, you're about to remember things you never learned, know things you were never taught. It's going to be overwhelming. More than overwhelming, Virgil added coldly. The accumulated experiences of every Sparta descendant who ever lived, all flooding into your consciousness simultaneously. Most minds would shatter under the weight. Thanks for the vote of confidence, I muttered, then had to steady myself as another wave of dimensional shifting hit us. This time, we found ourselves in what looked like a war zone. Buildings were half collapsed, the sky was a sickly green color, and in the distance, I could see figures that were definitely not human fighting what looked like a horde of creatures I couldn't identify. But through the chaos, I could also see familiar faces. Ria's was there, her destruction magic carving paths through what looked like crystalline monsters. Kiba was fighting alongside someone who appeared to be made of living light. Koneko was protecting a group of terrified civilians while punching creatures that seemed to be composed of liquid shadow. There, Akeno pointed toward where our friends were fighting. We need to, that's when the first wave of inherited memories hit me. Suddenly, I wasn't just Issei Hyodo standing in a dimensional catastrophe. I was also Dante, facing down a demon lord in a crumbling cathedral. I was Virgil, cutting through the fabric of reality itself in pursuit of power. I was Sparta, making the choice to rebel against his own kind for the sake of humanity. But more than that, I was experiencing the accumulated knowledge of every technique, every battle, every moment of growth that had ever been achieved by anyone carrying Sparta's blood. It was like having 1,000 lifetimes of combat experience downloaded directly into my brain. Focus, kid, Dante's voice cut through the chaos in my mind. Don't try to process it all at once. Just take what you need for right now. What do I need? I gasped, falling to my knees as wave after wave of memories crashed over me. The technique for dimensional stabilization. It's there, you just learned it from your great-great-grandmother's experiences fighting reality-warping demons in the 13th century. Somehow, impossibly, I could feel that knowledge settling into place. It was like remembering something I'd always known but had temporarily forgotten. The theory, the application, even the specific hand movements required, all of it was suddenly as familiar as breathing. But using it would require more power than I'd ever channeled before. Not just my devil abilities or my hunter heritage, but the full combined might of everyone connected to our mental link, amplified through the boosted gear and focused through techniques that predated recorded history. Akeno, I said, struggling to my feet, I need you to get everyone together. Physical proximity within about 50 meters. Can you do that? What are you planning? She asked, but she was already moving, using her electromagnetic abilities to send signals to the others through the chaos. Something really stupid, I admitted. I'm going to try to manually stabilize the dimensional barriers by serving as a living anchor point between realities. That could kill you, Ria's voice cut through the mental link as she received Akeno's message. The amount of power required will either save everyone or tear me apart, I finished. But if we don't try, reality collapses completely and everyone dies anyway. I like our odds better this way. Over the next few minutes, as dimensional shifts continued to rock the area and more creatures from various realms poured through the growing rifts, our alliance managed to form up in a rough defensive circle. Angels, devils, fallen angels, and devil hunters, all working together to protect the growing crowd of civilian refugees who had been caught in the dimensional chaos. So what's the plan? Nero asked as he appeared next to me, his devil arm glowing with contained power. Besides something really stupid, I mean. I'm going to use everyone's power, channeled through the mental link and amplified by the boosted gear to essentially become a dimensional anchor, I explained. The theory is that if I can synchronize my existence with all the overlapping realities simultaneously, I can force them to separate properly. And if the theory is wrong, then I get torn apart by contradictory dimensional forces and probably take everyone connected to me through the mental link with me, I said with a grin that felt more confident than I actually was. But hey, at least we'll all go out together. Your sense of humor is definitely inherited, Sparta's voice observed with what might have been approval. The process of preparing for the stabilization attempt was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Instead of just drawing on my own power, I had to open myself completely to the mental link. Not just the surface connection we'd been using for coordination, but the deep, fundamental bond that connected all of our souls. Through that connection, I could feel everyone's fears, their hopes, their absolute determination to protect the innocent people caught up in this catastrophe. But more than that, I could feel their trust, their willingness to literally share their life force with me in the hope that I could save everyone. Boost, 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 boost. The boosted gear's power flooded through me, but this time it wasn't just amplifying my abilities. It was amplifying the combined might of every person connected to our network, creating a feedback loop that pushed far beyond anything I'd ever imagined possible. Balance breaker, dimensional anchor protocol. The transformation was immediate and overwhelming. Silver light erupted from my body as I felt my consciousness expand to encompass everything. Every overlapping reality, every displaced realm, every confused dimensional fragment that was trying to exist in the same space, all of it became part of my awareness. Through my enhanced perception, I could see the true scope of what we were facing. It wasn't just a few dimensional overlaps. Entire multiverses were colliding, each one bringing its own physical laws and magical principles. The contradictions were creating cascade failures that were spreading across reality like cracks in glass. But I could also see the solution. Using techniques that belonged to ancestors I'd never met, drawing on power sources that spanned multiple generations of my bloodline, I began the process of manually separating the overlapped dimensions. It was like performing surgery on the fabric of existence itself. Each reality had to be carefully extracted from the tangle, its barriers restored, its connections to other realms properly regulated. And all of it had to be done while maintaining my own existence across multiple dimensional states simultaneously. The pain was indescribable. Having your consciousness exist in 17 different realities at once, each with slightly different versions of yourself, while trying to perform repairs that required perfect precision. It was like trying to perform brain surgery on yourself while someone else controlled your hands. But through the mental link, I could feel my friends and allies supporting me. Riaz was providing the magical theory I needed to understand dimensional barriers. Gabriel was lending me purification energy to cleanse the corruption that was preventing proper separation. Lady was sharing combat experiences that helped me fight off the creatures that kept trying to interfere with the process. Slowly, painfully, the overlapped realities began to separate. The desert flickered away, replaced by the proper geography of Japan. The multiple moons in the sky faded, leaving only Earth's natural satellite. The impossible creatures from other dimensions found themselves pushed back to their proper realms as the barriers solidified. But the effort was killing me. I could feel my life force being consumed by the process, my very existence being stretched across too many realities to maintain coherently. The accumulated memories from my bloodline were becoming harder to distinguish from my own experiences, and I was starting to lose track of which thoughts belonged to Issei and which belonged to ancestors who had died centuries ago. Kid, you need to let go, Dante's voice was urgent. You've done enough, the barriers are stable, if you keep pushing, you're going to lose yourself completely. Not yet, I replied, though I wasn't sure if I was speaking aloud or just thinking. There's still corruption in the dimensional matrix. If I don't cleanse it completely, this will just happen again. The boy is right, Sparta's ancient voice carried a note of pride, but he cannot complete this alone. The final phase requires a sacrifice that transcends individual existence. What kind of sacrifice? I asked, though I was starting to understand what he meant. To permanently stabilize the barriers, someone must become part of the dimensional matrix itself. Not death, but transformation. You would exist as a guardian of reality's structure, preventing this kind of catastrophe from ever happening again. The implications hit me like a physical blow. I would survive, but not as Issei Hyodo. I would become something else. A conscious force spread throughout the dimensional barriers, protecting the worlds but no longer truly belonging to any of them. Through the mental link, I could feel my friends' reactions to this revelation. Horror, desperation, absolute refusal to let me make that sacrifice. There has to be another way, Ria's mental voice was fierce with determination. We'll find different techniques, other solutions. There isn't time, I replied gently. The corruption is spreading again. If I don't do this now, everything we've accomplished will be undone. Then we'll face it together, came an unexpected response from everyone connected to the mental link simultaneously. If the dimensional matrix needs a conscious guardian, then it gets all of us. What followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Instead of me alone transforming to become part of reality's structure, everyone connected to our network began the process together. Angels, devils, fallen angels, humans, devil hunters, all of us becoming part of something larger than any individual could achieve. The transformation was gentle this time, rather than painful. I felt my consciousness expanding not just across dimensions, but across perspectives, sharing existence with everyone who had chosen to take this step with me. We became a collective guardian, each of us retaining our individual identity while being part of something infinitely greater. When the process was complete, we found ourselves back in normal reality, but changed. I was still Issei Hyodo, still recognizably myself, but I could feel the dimensional barriers as part of my own awareness. Any threat to reality's stability would be something I sensed immediately, and I had the power to respond to it instantly. More importantly, I wasn't alone. Through our permanent connection to the dimensional matrix, all of us could communicate instantaneously across any distance, coordinate responses to supernatural threats with perfect efficiency, and support each other in ways that transcended physical limitations. So, Nero said as we looked around at the now stable reality surrounding us, how does it feel to be part of the cosmic background structure of existence? Different, I admitted, but good different. Like I finally understand what I was meant to be. This is just the beginning, Sparta's voice carried a note of approval through our enhanced connection. Reality is stable now, but there will always be new threats, new challenges. The pure demons were just the first test. Looking around at my friends, my family, who had chosen to share this transformation with me, I felt a deep sense of peace. Whatever came next, we would face it together. not just as allies or companions, but as integral parts of the very reality we had sworn to protect. Bring it on, I said, and meant it. The dimensional crisis was over, but our real work was just beginning. 2 weeks after becoming integrated into the dimensional matrix, I was beginning to understand that our victory over the pure demons had been just the opening act of something much larger. The morning started normally enough, or as normally as anything could be when you existed as both an individual person and part of reality's structural framework. I was sitting in my room at the Gremory estate, trying to work through calculus homework that seemed absurdly trivial compared to maintaining the stability of multiple dimensions, when the first warning hit me. It wasn't like the mental link we'd established with our allies. This was deeper, more fundamental, a disturbance in the dimensional barriers themselves that I felt like a physical blow to the chest. Kid, we've got trouble. Dante's voice cut through my consciousness with unusual urgency. Something big is moving in the deeper layers of hell, something that's been waiting for an opportunity like this. The dimensional restructuring has created vulnerabilities, Virgil added, his mental voice carrying calculation and concern. Our efforts to stabilize the barriers have inadvertently opened pathways that were previously sealed. Before I could ask for clarification, the mental link with my allies exploded with alarm. Emergency at the Vatican, Gabriel's voice was strained with effort. Something is tearing through the blessed barriers like they're made of paper. Multiple breaches reported across 7 different countries, Lady added grimly. These aren't random attacks, this is coordinated. Whatever's coming through isn't like the pure demons, Riaz reported, her mental voice tight with worry. The energy signatures are older. Much older. I stood up from my desk, homework forgotten, as power began flowing through me in response to the growing threat. Through my connection to the dimensional matrix, I could feel the disturbances spreading, not chaotic rifts like we dealt with before, but carefully planned incursions designed to exploit specific weaknesses in reality's structure. Issei, my mother's voice called from downstairs. Your friends are here. I looked out my window to see Riaz, Akaino, Koneko, and Kiba materializing in our backyard through what looked like an emergency teleportation circle. Their expressions were grim, and I could see the tension in their postures even from this distance. This is it, came a new voice through our enhanced connection, Sparta himself, speaking with the weight of millennia. The entity I've been dreading. My oldest enemy has finally found a way to break free from the prison I helped create eons ago. Who? I asked aloud as I rushed downstairs to meet my friends. Mundus, the Prince of Darkness. The demon lord who ruled hell before I rebelled against demonkind, if he's escaped his prison. The implications hit me like a freight train. We weren't just dealing with another threat to dimensional stability. We were facing the original source of demonic power, a being so dangerous that it had taken the combined might of heaven and hell working together to contain him. This changes everything, I said as I joined the others in the backyard. What changes everything? Riaz asked, her blue-green eyes scanning my face with obvious concern. Mundus is free. The temperature around us seemed to drop 10 degrees at the mention of that name. Even Koneko, usually unflappable, took an involuntary step backward. Impossible, Kiba said, though his hand was already moving toward his sword. The seals holding him were created by Sparta himself. They should have lasted until the end of time. Should have, I agreed grimly. But our dimensional restructuring created vulnerabilities that an entity of his power could exploit. He's been planning this for 2,000 years. As if in response to our conversation, the sky above us began to darken despite the midday sun. Not clouds, something else, something that absorbed light rather than blocking it. Through the darkness, I could see shapes moving, vast and predatory. He's not just escaping. Virgil's voice carried genuine alarm for the first time since I'd known him. He's bringing his entire realm with him. This isn't an invasion, it's a merger. The mental link erupted with reports from around the globe. London is under siege by creatures I don't have names for. The Eiffel Tower just changed. It's made of bone now. Half of Tokyo has been replaced by what looks like a medieval hellscape. Through my connection to the dimensional matrix, I could feel what was happening. Instead of trying to break through the barriers between realms, Mundus was systematically replacing sections of our reality with pieces of his own domain. Not destruction, but transformation on a global scale. We need to get to the coordination center, I said, already feeling power building within me. If this is what I think it is, the ground beneath our feet suddenly cracked, revealing not dirt and bedrock but what looked like flowing lava. The air filled with the scent of sulfur and burning flesh, and in the distance, I could hear screaming, not from people, but from the very fabric of reality as it was forcibly reshaped. Too late for coordination, Akaino observed with her usual calm in the face of disaster. He's already here, she was right. Through the gathering darkness above us, a figure was descending, massive, magnificent, and absolutely terrifying. Mundus in his true form was like looking at a fallen star given consciousness and malevolent purpose. Wings that blotted out the sky, eyes that burned with the hatred of eons, and a presence that made every instinct I possessed scream warnings. When he spoke, his voice carried across dimensions, Sparta's air. How disappointing. I had expected the bloodline to produce something more impressive. Boost, 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 boost. Boost, power flooded through me as the boosted gear responded to the massive threat, but this time it felt different. Instead of just amplifying my abilities, it was drawing on the dimensional matrix itself, pulling energy from the very structure of reality. Balance breaker, dimensional guardian protocol. The transformation was immediate and overwhelming. Silver light erupted from my body as I felt my consciousness expand to encompass not just my individual existence but my role as a living component of reality's framework. When the light faded, I was armored in what looked like crystallized starlight, and the twin swords in my hands hummed with power drawn from multiple universes. Better, Mundus acknowledged with what might have been approval. But still insufficient. He gestured casually, and the landscape around us simply changed. The Gremory estate vanished, replaced by what looked like the throne room of a palace carved from living shadow. My friends found themselves bound by chains of dark energy, held fast but unharmed for now. I offer you the same choice I offered your ancestor 2 millennia ago, Mundus continued, settling onto a throne that materialized beneath him. Kneel, acknowledge my supremacy, and I will allow you to serve at my side as reality is reshaped to my specifications. Counteroffer, I said, raising my swords. You go back to whatever hole you crawled out of, and maybe I'll make your defeat quick. His laughter was like the sound of worlds ending. Such arrogance, just like Sparta. Very well, if you will not serve willingly, you will serve as an example. The battle that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Mundus wasn't just powerful, he was power itself, the fundamental force that had shaped demonic civilization for eons beyond counting. Every technique I used, he countered effortlessly. Every strategy I attempted, he anticipated perfectly. But I had advantages he didn't expect. Through my connection to the dimensional matrix, I could draw on power sources he couldn't access. And through the mental link with my allies, I had coordination and support that transcended individual capability. Issei, Ria's voice cut through the chaos of battle. The chains holding us, they're not just physical restraints. They're siphoning our power to feed his transformation. I spared a glance toward my friends and saw what she meant. The dark energy binding them was indeed draining their abilities, but more than that, it was using their power to fuel Mundus's integration with our reality. The longer this battle went on, the stronger he would become. Kid, you need to break those chains, Dante urged, but doing that means turning your back on Mundus, and he won't give you that opportunity. Unless, Virgil added thoughtfully, you force him to divide his attention. What do you mean? Your greatest advantage isn't your power, it's your connections. You're not fighting this battle alone, and neither is he. Mundus has brought his entire realm with him, including every demon lord and prince under his command. If you can threaten his domain directly. I understood immediately. Instead of focusing my attacks on Mundus himself, I began targeting the transformed landscape around us. Each strike of my swords didn't just cut through matter, it severed the connections between his realm and ours, forcing pieces of our reality to reassert themselves. The effect was immediate. Mundus's confident expression shifted to alarm as sections of his throne room flickered back into the normal world. More importantly, maintaining his hold on the transformed landscape required active concentration, which meant he couldn't focus entirely on our battle. Clever, he admitted, his attacks becoming more desperate, but ultimately futile. Even if you restore this small area, I have already claimed 9/10 of your world. Surrender now, and I may allow your friends to survive what comes next. Not happening, I said, pouring more power into my dimensional restoration efforts. That's when I felt it, a massive surge of energy through the mental link. Not just from my immediate allies, but from everyone connected to our network. Angels, devils, fallen angels, humans, devil hunters, all of them channeling their power through our psychic connection and into my efforts. You're not alone in this, Gabriel's voice carried absolute determination. None of us are. Together, Michael added with quiet intensity. All of us as one. The power flowing through me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Not just the combined might of every supernatural faction, but something deeper. The collective will of every being who had chosen to stand against tyranny, to protect the innocent, to defend the freedom to choose one's own path. For the first time since the battle began, Mundus looked genuinely concerned. Impossible, he breathed. No single entity can channel that much diverse power without being torn apart by the contradictions. You're right, I said, feeling the truth of it as I spoke. I can't, but I'm not a single entity anymore, I'm all of us. The transformation that followed was unlike any I had experienced before. Instead of just changing my form, it felt like reality itself was restructuring around me. When the light faded, I stood transformed not just as an individual, but as a living embodiment of every positive aspect of existence. Protection, sacrifice, the choice to stand against overwhelming darkness. Mundus's next attack shattered against me like water against stone. His realm began collapsing as the power I represented proved antithetical to everything he stood for. Not destruction, but restoration, the fundamental forces that built rather than tore down. This is not possible, he said, his form beginning to flicker as his hold on our reality weakened. I am the original darkness. I am the source from which all demons spring. And I replied, raising my swords for the final strike, am everyone who has ever chosen to stand against you. The battle ended not with violence, but with revelation. As my blades met Mundus's defenses, instead of cutting through them, they revealed what lay beneath. Not a demon lord drunk on power, but a being who had been corrupted so long ago that he had forgotten what he had originally been. You were one of the first angels, I realized with sudden understanding. Before the rebellion, before the corruption, you were one of the original guardians of creation. For a moment, his expression shifted to something that might have been relief. I had forgotten the darkness, the hatred, it consumed everything I was. But you remember for me. What followed was not a death, but a healing. The power flowing through me, the combined will of every being who chose creation over destruction, reached into the corruption that had consumed Mundus for eons and began the slow process of restoration. As his true form was revealed, not a demon lord, but a wounded angel who had been lost in darkness for longer than civilizations had existed. The changes he had made to our reality began reversing themselves. Cities returned to their proper forms, the sky cleared, and the sense of oppressive malevolence that had hung over everything lifted like fog in sunlight. This is not victory, he said softly as his form began to fade. I was only the first. Others will come, beings who chose corruption willingly, who cannot be redeemed as I have been. Then we'll face them together, I said, meaning it, all of us. That's what we do. As Mundus disappeared, not destroyed, but returned to what he had originally been, I felt the transformation fading. The incredible power that had flowed through me dissipated, leaving me once again as simply Issei Hyodo. But changed, evolved, more integrated with my role as a guardian of reality's stability. My friends rushed to my side as the last of the dark chains dissolved, their faces showing a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and awe. So, Akeno said with a tired smile, how does it feel to redeem the Prince of Darkness? Exhausting, I admitted, but right, like that's what this power was always meant for, not just fighting the darkness, but healing it when possible. Through the mental link, I could feel the satisfaction and approval of my extended family. We had faced what should have been an impossible threat and found a solution that went beyond simple victory. But even as we celebrated, intelligence was already coming through our network about other disturbances, other ancient powers stirring in response to Mundus's brief return. The war was far from over. The real work is just beginning, Sparta's voice carried pride and anticipation. But you've proven something today that I wasn't sure was possible, that corruption can be healed, that even the deepest darkness can be reached by sufficient light. Looking around at my friends, my family, my allies who had been willing to share their very essence to help me accomplish the impossible, I felt a deep sense of purpose settling into place. We weren't just guardians of reality anymore. We were healers, protectors, and living proof that no matter how deep the darkness, there was always hope for redemption. Bring on whatever comes next, I said and meant it. The hardest battles were always the ones where victory meant healing rather than destruction. But those were also the ones most worth fighting. 6 months had passed since the Mundus incident, and the supernatural world had settled into what could cautiously be called a new normal. I stood on the balcony of what had once been the Gremory Estate's guest wing, but was now officially designated as the Interdimensional Crisis Response Center, a name that sounded far more bureaucratic than the reality of our daily operations. Through my connection to the dimensional matrix, I could sense the steady pulse of reality's barriers, all stable and properly maintained for the first time in millennia. The view from the balcony showed the fruits of our unprecedented alliance. In the courtyard below, I could see Akeno leading a mixed training session where devils, angels, and fallen angels practiced coordinated battle techniques. What would have been unthinkable political heresy a year ago was now standard procedure. "Penny for your thoughts?" Ria's voice came from behind me, accompanied by the soft sound of footsteps on the balcony tiles. I turned to see her approaching with 2 cups of coffee, her crimson hair catching the morning sunlight. The months since our integration into the dimensional matrix had changed all of us, but perhaps none so visibly as Ria's. There was a confidence in her bearing now that went beyond her natural nobility, the assurance of someone who had faced the end of reality and helped prevent it. "Just thinking about how different everything is," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. 6 months ago, the idea of angels and devils working together was fantasy. Now it's Tuesday," she finished with a smile. "I know what you mean. Sometimes I have to remind myself that this isn't a dream." Through our mental link, stronger now than ever after our shared integration, I could feel her underlying contentment. The constant political pressure she'd faced as a devil heiress had been replaced by something far more meaningful: the satisfaction of building something entirely new. "Any word from the reconnaissance teams?" I asked, settling into one of the chairs we'd placed on the balcony for these morning briefings. "Michael's scouts report all clear in the European sectors. Azazel's people haven't detected any unusual dimensional activity in North America. Gabriel says the purification barriers are holding steady worldwide." She paused to sip her coffee. "Lady and Nero finished their sweep of the old pure demon sites, all completely cleansed, no residual corruption." It was good news, but I'd learned not to trust periods of calm. Through my connection to the dimensional barriers, I could sense something, not a threat exactly, but a sense of anticipation, like the universe was holding its breath. "Kids getting paranoid in his old age," Dante's voice chuckled in my mind. The connection to my ancestral spirits had evolved along with everything else, becoming more like casual conversation than the urgent warnings of our early encounters. "Vigilance is not paranoia," Virgil countered with his usual precision. "The interdimensional stability we've achieved has created new possibilities, not all of them beneficial." "What kind of possibilities?" I asked through the mental connection I'd learned to maintain without speaking aloud. "Entities that were previously unable to approach our reality due to the chaotic barrier conditions," Sparta's ancient voice explained. "With the dimensional matrix properly regulated, beings from the furthest reaches of existence can now potentially reach us." Before I could process the implications of that warning, my phone buzzed with an urgent message. As did Ria's, and from the sudden tension I could feel through our extended network, everyone else's as well. "Emergency at Mount Fuji," Koneko's mental voice cut through our morning calm with characteristic directness. "Something's emerging from the dimensional substrate. Big, really big." "Define really big," I responded while already moving toward the balcony railing. "Continental scale energy signature," Akeno added from the courtyard below. "Whatever it is, it's not hiding its presence." Ria's and I exchanged glances. In the months since our alliance had formed, we'd dealt with dozens of supernatural incidents, but they'd all been relatively small-scale: rogue demons, dimensional rifts, the occasional ancient artifact activating. Nothing that required our full combined response. "Looks like the quiet period is over," I said, feeling power beginning to build in response to the perceived threat. "About time," Ria's replied with a grin that was half anticipation, half relief. I was starting to get bored with peaceful mornings. The flight to Mount Fuji took less than 10 minutes with our evolved transportation methods. What we found there defied easy description. The mountain itself was unchanged, but the space around it was more. Reality had thickened, layers of existence that normally remained separate had become visible and accessible. Through the dimensional matrix, I could feel what was happening. Something vast was using the mountain as an anchor point to manifest in our reality. But unlike every previous threat we'd faced, this presence didn't feel malevolent. If anything, it radiated a sense of ancient wisdom and patient observation. "It's not trying to invade," Gabriel's voice came through our mental link as she arrived with a contingent of angel scouts. "It's introducing itself? First contact protocol," Michael added, his tactical mind already adapting to the unprecedented situation. "We may be dealing with an entity that's genuinely curious about our recent dimensional restructuring." As if responding to our speculation, the presence around Mount Fuji began to coalesce into a more recognizable form. What emerged was unlike anything in our collective experience. A being that seemed to be composed of crystallized time itself, constantly shifting between different temporal states while maintaining perfect coherence. When it spoke, its voice resonated through multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Greetings, guardians of the dimensional matrix. I am the observer, one of the entities responsible for monitoring the health of reality's fundamental structure across multiple universal clusters. Oh, great, Nero's mental voice carried his characteristic irreverence. Cosmic bureaucracy. We are intrigued by the recent stabilization of your local dimensional barriers, the observer continued. The integration of biological entities into the matrix infrastructure is unprecedented in our experience. I stepped forward, feeling my role as the primary matrix interface drawing me into the conversation. You're saying what we did has never happened before. Correct. Typically, dimensional matrices are maintained by artificial constructs or purely energy-based entities. The fusion of conscious biological beings with reality's structural framework creates possibilities we have not previously observed. Possibilities for what? Riaz asked through our link. The observer seemed to perceive our mental communication, its form shifting to acknowledge her question directly. For evolution, your reality has become something new, not just a stable dimensional configuration, but a living system capable of growth, adaptation, and conscious decision-making. Which means, I prompted, which means your universe has qualified for advancement to the next tier of cosmic development. You will be granted access to the greater dimensional network, the infrastructure that connects all mature realities across existence. The implications hit me like a physical blow. We weren't just local guardians anymore, we were about to become part of something unimaginably vast. Kid, Dante's voice carried a note of awe, I think you just graduated to the big leagues. What does that entail? I asked aloud, aware that this conversation would determine the future course of not just our world, but potentially countless others. New responsibilities, new opportunities, and new threats, the observer replied with what might have been approval. Mature realities are expected to assist in the maintenance of universal stability across multiple dimensional clusters. In return, you gain access to knowledge, resources, and allies beyond your current comprehension. And if we refuse, Virgil's voice carried his usual strategic caution. Refusal is not an option once qualification has been achieved, the observer stated matter-of-factly. Conscious dimensional matrices cannot remain isolated. They either advance to greater responsibilities or destabilize due to their unused potential. I looked around at my friends, my family, the people who had chosen to share this impossible responsibility with me. Through our mental link, I could feel their mixture of excitement, apprehension, and determination. What do you think? I asked through our network. I think, Riaz responded with her characteristic directness, that we've never backed down from a challenge yet. The opportunity to help stabilize reality on a universal scale, Gabriel added thoughtfully. How could we refuse? Besides, Akeno's mental voice carried her usual playful undertone, it sounds like it would be incredibly boring to stay small-scale after everything we've accomplished. Through the dimensional matrix, I could feel the agreement building among everyone connected to our network. Not just the core group, but all the angels, devils, fallen angels, and humans who had chosen to join our alliance. Thousands of individuals, all united in their willingness to take on whatever came next. We accept, I said to the observer, feeling the weight and rightness of the decision. The transformation that followed was unlike anything we'd experienced before. Instead of individual power increases or new abilities, it felt like our entire reality was upgrading. The dimensional barriers didn't just stabilize, they became adaptive, able to respond to threats and opportunities we couldn't even perceive yet. But more than that, our consciousness expanded. Suddenly, I could sense other realities, other versions of the dimensional matrix, other groups of beings who had taken on the responsibility of maintaining universal stability. We weren't alone anymore, we were part of a vast community of cosmic guardians. Your first assignment, the observer continued as the enhancement process completed, will be to assist in the stabilization of a reality cluster that has been destabilized by an entity similar to your Mundus, but more ambitious. Define more ambitious, I asked, though I suspected I didn't want to know the answer. This entity has not merely attempted to merge its domain with a single reality. It has been systematically consuming entire universal clusters, growing stronger with each absorbed dimension. Your experience with redemption-based resolution makes you uniquely qualified to address this threat. I felt a familiar surge of determination building within me. This was what we'd been preparing for, even if we hadn't known it. All the battles, all the growth, all the learning to work together, it had been leading to this moment. When do we start? I asked. Immediately. The consumed realities retain traces of their original inhabitants' consciousness. Every moment of delay means more suffering, more lost potential. Looking around at my allies, my family, I saw the same resolution in their faces that I felt in my own heart. We'd started this journey as strangers thrown together by circumstance. We'd become something unprecedented, a living force for protection, healing, and hope on a cosmic scale. Then let's get to work, I said, feeling the dimensional matrix respond to our collective will. As we prepared to embark on our first universal-scale mission, I found myself thinking about how far we'd all come. From a perverted high school student who just wanted to touch Issei to a cosmic guardian responsible for the stability of reality itself, the journey had been surreal. But looking at Ria's, at Akano, at all the friends who had chosen to share this impossible responsibility with me, I realized something important. The core of who I was hadn't changed. I was still someone who would do anything to protect the people I cared about. The scale had just gotten a lot bigger. "Ready for the next adventure, kid?" Dante asked with obvious pride. "More than ready," I replied, watching as new dimensional gateways began opening around Mount Fuji, each one leading to realities that needed our help. The age of local supernatural politics was over. The age of universal guardianship had begun, and we were exactly who we needed to be to handle it. "Let's save some universes," I said through our mental network, feeling the excitement and determination of thousands of allied beings responding in harmony. Together came the unified response from everyone connected to our matrix. Together, that was how we'd gotten this far, and that was how we'd face whatever cosmic challenges awaited us. The legacy of the Sparta bloodline had evolved beyond anything my ancestors could have imagined. But at its heart, it remained the same, standing between the darkness and those who needed protection, no matter the cost or scale. I was Issei Hyodo, grandson of Dante, servant of Ria's Gremory, devil hunter and devil, and now guardian of universal stability. And I was exactly where I belonged. 5 years later, the Interdimensional Academy stood where Q Academy had once been, though the transformation had been so comprehensive that only the most observant visitor might recognize traces of the original buildings. Crystalline spires rose alongside traditional architecture, training grounds sprawled across what had been sports fields, and the air itself hummed with the carefully regulated energies of a dozen different supernatural disciplines being taught simultaneously. I stood in my office on the top floor of the central tower, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as the afternoon classes concluded. In the courtyard below, I could see scenes that would have been impossible to imagine when this whole journey began. A group of young devils practiced angelic purification techniques under Gabriel's patient instruction. Nearby, human students with newly awakened sacred gears learned dimensional theory from Azazel, while fallen angels provided practical demonstrations. At the combat practice area, Nero was sparring with a teenager whose technique showed clear influences from both devil magic and devil hunter training. "Look at them go," Dante's voice carried warm approval through our long-established mental connection. "Kid, you've built something incredible here." "We built it," I corrected, settling into the chair behind my desk. The office was comfortable but not ostentatious. Awards and commendations from various supernatural organizations shared wall space with photos of students, faculty, and the friends who had become family over the years. The academy had been Ria's idea, actually. 3 years after our integration into the greater dimensional network, she'd pointed out that our success in handling universal-scale threats was creating a new problem. A generation of young supernatural beings who grew up expecting cooperation between factions, but lacked the training to maintain that cooperation effectively. "We need to teach them not just how to use their abilities," she'd argued during one of our planning sessions, "but how to work together, how to think beyond factional boundaries, how to be the next generation of cosmic guardians." The project had taken 2 years to implement, requiring negotiations with every major supernatural authority and the creation of entirely new educational frameworks. But the results spoke for themselves. The Academy's first graduating class had gone on to establish similar institutions across 3 different dimensional clusters. A soft knock at my office door interrupted my reflection. "Come in," I called, already sensing through the dimensional matrix who it was. Akano entered, carrying a stack of reports and wearing the comfortable smile that had become her default expression over the years. The trauma from her brief time as a ritual sacrifice had healed completely, replaced by a quiet confidence that made her even more beautiful than before. "Final enrollment numbers for next term," she said, placing the reports on my desk. "We're going to need to expand the dormitory facilities again. How many this time?" 237 new applications approved, including, she paused dramatically, "our first student from a reality cluster we've never had contact with before." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, a young dragon from the Eternal Flame dimension. Apparently word of our success in integrating different power systems has spread further than we thought." Dragons wanting to learn devil hunter techniques, Virgil's voice carried amusement. The irony is not lost on me. Speaking of integration, Akeno continued, settling into the chair across from my desk, have you given any more thought to the proposal from the Cosmic Council? I grimaced. The proposal in question was both an honor and a burden, an invitation to establish a permanent seat on the governing body that oversaw dimensional stability across all known realities. It would be recognition of everything we'd accomplished, but it would also mean less time for hands-on involvement with the academy and our students. I'm still considering it, I said. The council needs voices that understand ground-level work, but you'd rather be here teaching the next generation how to save universes, she finished with understanding. I know. We all feel the same way. Through the mental link we all shared, I could sense the others going about their daily routines. Ria's was in a strategy session with representatives from 7 different realities, coordinating response protocols for an emerging temporal anomaly. Koneko was leading an advanced combat class where students learned to fight creatures that existed outside conventional spacetime. Kiba was in the research labs, working with scientists from across the dimensional network to develop new techniques for reality stabilization. All of them had found their calling in this new world we'd helped create, and all of them had grown beyond anything we could have imagined 5 years ago. There's something else, Akeno said, her tone shifting to something more serious. We've detected unusual activity in the boundary zones. The boundary zones were regions where multiple realities came close enough to touch without actually merging, naturally occurring weak points in the dimensional matrix that required constant monitoring. In the 5 years since our integration into the greater dimensional network, they'd been stable and manageable. What kind of activity? Structured, purposeful. Someone's testing the barriers systematically, but not trying to break through. It's almost like they're studying us, I finished, feeling a familiar tingle of anticipation. How long has this been going on? The patterns started about 3 weeks ago. Nothing aggressive, nothing that triggers automatic defensive responses. Just observation. Could be another observer-class entity, Sparta's ancient voice suggested. Your reality has become something of a curiosity in cosmic circles. Or, Dante added with characteristic optimism, it could be someone who needs help but doesn't know how to ask for it. Before I could respond, my communication device chimed with an urgent priority message. As did Akeno's, and from the sudden spike of attention I felt through our network, everyone else's as well. Emergency at the main gateway, Nero's mental voice cut through the calm. We've got visitors. Multiple entities, definitely not hostile, but you need to see this for yourself. Akeno and I exchanged glances, then moved toward the window that faced the Academy's main dimensional gateway, a massive archway of crystallized spacetime that served as our primary connection to the greater dimensional network. What we saw there made me smile. 3 figures stood before the gateway, clearly nervous but determined. They were young, probably around the same age I'd been when this whole adventure started, and their power signatures were a fascinating mix I'd never encountered before. The first was obviously part angel, but her wings showed clear draconic influences, and her energy field carried traces of something that felt almost like sacred gear enhancement. The second appeared to be a devil, but with modifications that suggested extensive training in what looked like hunter techniques. The third was definitely human, but her spiritual pressure was intense enough to make the gateway's stabilization fields fluctuate. And floating around her shoulders were what looked like miniature versions of my own spectral swords. Well, I'll be damned, Dante's voice carried genuine surprise. Kid, I think those are your students. My what? Not your direct students, your inspirations. Look at their techniques, their power combinations. They've been studying recordings of your battles and figuring out how to adapt your methods to their own abilities. I studied the 3 young figures more carefully and realized Dante was right. Their stances, their energy flow patterns, even the way they held themselves, all of it showed clear influence from the fighting style I'd developed over the years. We should go meet them, Akeno suggested, already moving toward the door. Agreed, but let's bring the others. If these 3 have come all this way to find us, they deserve to meet the whole team. 20 minutes later, our core group had assembled in the Academy's main reception hall. Ria's arrived still carrying notes from her strategy session. Koneko appeared with training equipment she'd been testing, and Kiba brought along several of the research projects he'd been working on. The 3 visitors stood in the center of the hall, looking around with expressions of awe and determination. Up close, I could see they were even younger than I'd initially thought, probably 16 or 17, around the age I'd been when Ria's first saved my life. Welcome to the Interdimensional Academy, I said, stepping forward. I'm Issei Hyodo. These are my colleagues and friends. We understand you've come a long way to find us. The angel-dragon hybrid spoke first, her voice carrying a mixture of nervousness and resolve. My name is Celestine Draconia. This is Marcus Belmont, she gestured to the devil with hunter training, and Sarah Chen, indicating the human with spectral weapons. We've come from Reality Cluster Designation Omega-72. To ask for your help. What kind of help? Riaz asked, moving to stand beside me. Marcus stepped forward, his devil heritage showing in the way shadows seemed to bend around him. Our home reality is stable, but we're facing a problem that our local authorities don't know how to handle. There's been an increase in entities that don't belong to any known supernatural category, things that seem to exist in the spaces between established power systems. And our attempts to deal with them using traditional methods have been unsuccessful, Sarah added, her spectral swords flickering into and out of existence around her hands. We've studied the records of your battles, learned what we could from long-distance observation. But we need proper training in integration techniques. I felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with my own accomplishments. These three had faced a problem their world couldn't solve, analyzed what they needed to address it, and traveled across dimensional barriers to seek out the training they required. It was exactly the kind of initiative and cooperation we'd been hoping to inspire. The next generation, Virgil's voice carried approval. They understand that strength comes not from power alone, but from the wisdom to seek help when needed. Integration techniques, I repeated thoughtfully. You're talking about combining power systems that aren't supposed to work together. Exactly, Celestine said, her dragon-influenced wings shifting with nervous energy. We've seen how you merged devil magic with sacred gear enhancement and hunter techniques. How you created something new from incompatible systems. We need to learn how to do the same thing, Marcus added. Our reality is developing threats that can only be addressed by approaches that don't exist yet. Sarah nodded eagerly. We're willing to do whatever it takes. Training, study, practical application. We just need someone to teach us how to think beyond the limitations of traditional supernatural categories. I looked around at my friends, seeing the same recognition in their faces that I felt. This was why we'd built the academy, why we'd spent years developing new educational frameworks. Not just to train people in existing techniques, but to inspire them to create entirely new approaches to cosmic protection. Well, I said with a grin, you've come to the right place, but I should warn you, our training program is intensive, challenging, and will probably change you in ways you can't predict. We're ready, all three said simultaneously, then looked at each other with surprised smiles. Already synchronizing, Akano observed with amusement through our mental link. They're going to fit right in. All right then, Ria said, stepping forward with her official Academy Administrator expression. Welcome to your new home for the next 2 years. Let's see what you can become. Over the following months, watching Celestine, Marcus, and Sarah grow into their potential became one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. They approached their training with the same determination and willingness to transcend boundaries that had defined our own journey, but with the advantage of systematic instruction rather than learning through crisis. Celestine learned to weave her angelic purification abilities through her draconic power, creating techniques that could cleanse corruption on a scale we'd never achieved before. Marcus developed devil magic applications that incorporated hunter precision, allowing him to target specific aspects of supernatural threats with surgical accuracy. Sarah pushed the boundaries of what human spiritual energy could accomplish, creating manifestations that rivaled anything we'd seen from sacred gear wielders. But more than their individual growth, it was watching them work together that filled me with hope for the future. They didn't just coordinate their abilities, they thought as a unified force, each one's strengths naturally complementing the other's approaches. They're going to surpass us, I said to Dante one evening as I watched them practice advanced dimensional stabilization techniques. Good, he replied with obvious satisfaction. That's how it should work. Each generation builds on what came before and reaches higher. The legacy continues, Sparta's ancient voice carried deep contentment. Not just the power, but the wisdom to use it properly. The test of that wisdom came sooner than any of us expected. 6 months into their training, while the 3 students were practicing advanced integration techniques in the Academy's specialized reality chambers, every alarm in the building started screaming simultaneously. Boundary zone breach? Koneko's mental voice cut through the chaos. Multiple entities, unknown configuration manifesting directly above the Academy. I rushed to the nearest window and looked up to see something that made my blood run cold. The sky above the Academy was cracking, Not like glass breaking, but like reality itself was developing fault lines. Through the cracks, I could see glimpses of something vast and hungry, an intelligence that felt both alien and malevolently purposeful. "It's not trying to invade," Riaz reported through our link as she analyzed the energy patterns. "It's trying to consume, absorb our reality into itself." A reality eater, Virgil identified with grim recognition. They're attracted to stable dimensional matrices because the energy is more concentrated. This one has been watching us, learning our patterns, waiting for the optimal moment to feed. Through the mental link, I could feel everyone in our network preparing for battle. But as power began building around the academy, I realized something that made me pause. This wasn't our fight anymore. "Celestine, Marcus, Sarah," I called through the academy's communication system. "Emergency protocols are in effect. This is what we've been training for." "But Issei," Celestine's mental voice carried worry, "we're not ready for something this scale." "You are," I interrupted gently. "Trust your training. Trust each other, and remember, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to try." What followed was one of the most terrifying and inspiring hours of my life. Instead of rushing in to handle the threat ourselves, our experienced team provided support and coordination while the 3 students took point against the reality eater. And they were magnificent. Celestine's Dragon Angel hybrid abilities allowed her to exist partially outside normal space-time, making her immune to the entity's reality-warping attacks. Marcus used Devil Magic, enhanced with Hunter Precision, to target the specific dimensional anchors the creature was using to maintain its manifestation. Sarah created spectral constructs that could operate in the spaces between stable reality, disrupting the entity's feeding process. But more than their individual contributions, it was their coordination that made the difference. They didn't just work together, they thought together, anticipating each other's needs and creating openings for techniques that none of them could have performed alone. When it was over, and the reality eater had been forced back to whatever dimension it had come from, I found the 3 students standing in the academy courtyard, exhausted but triumphant. "How does it feel?" I asked as our extended team gathered to congratulate them. "Like we're finally ready to go home," Sarah said with a tired smile. "Not because we want to leave, but because we know we can handle whatever we find there." "And you will," Riaz assured them. "But remember, you're not alone anymore. The Academy network spans multiple realities now. If you need help, if you want to share discoveries, if you just want to visit, you're always welcome." Looking around at the faces of my friends, my students, my extended family of cosmic guardians, I felt a deep sense of completion. We'd started as a small group of supernatural beings thrown together by circumstance. We'd become something unprecedented, a living force for protection and growth that spanned multiple universes. But more than that, we'd inspired others to reach beyond what they thought possible. The next generation wouldn't just inherit our responsibilities, they'd expand them, finding new solutions to challenges we couldn't even imagine yet. "So," Dante's voice carried warm satisfaction, "how does it feel to have saved the universe?" "Again, it feels like Tuesday," I replied, borrowing Ria's old phrase. "And like the best possible future." As the sun set over the interdimensional academy, painting the crystalline spires in shades of gold and crimson, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought us here. From a perverted high school student who just wanted to touch Issei to a cosmic guardian responsible for training the next generation of universal protectors, it had been a wild ride. But looking at Celestine, Marcus, and Sarah as they planned their return home, at the hundreds of other students who were learning to think beyond traditional boundaries, at the network of schools and training centers that had spread across dimensional clusters, I realized that the real legacy wasn't the power or the titles or the cosmic responsibilities. It was the proof that growth was always possible, that cooperation could overcome any barrier, and that there was no limit to what people could accomplish when they were willing to support each other. "Ready for whatever comes next?" Akeno asked through our mental link as we watched the next generation prepare to carry our mission forward. "Always," I replied, feeling the agreement of everyone connected to our network. Together came the unified response that had become our watchword. Together. That's how we'd gotten this far, and that's how the universe would keep getting better. I was Issei Hyodo, grandson of Dante, servant of Ria's Gremory, Devil Hunter and Devil, guardian of universal stability, and founder of the Interdimensional Academy. But most importantly, I was part of something larger than any individual achievement, a legacy of protection, growth, and hope that would continue long after any of us were gone. And that was exactly as it should be. The end. What a journey! Issei went from perverted high schooler to cosmic guardian training the next generation. From first manifesting spectral swords to establishing the interdimensional academy, absolutely epic. Drop a like and comment your favorite moment, subscribe for more crossover concepts, and let me know what mashups you want next. Thanks for watching, peace out.